Hello, my dear adventurers. If you like the story, please subscribe. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and wonder. Tonight, we journey far back in time to the ancient lands of Britannia, to a world of mist-shrouded forests and sacred groves, where druids walk between the worlds and the old god still whispered through the trees. This is a tale of wisdom passed down through generations, of connections to the earth and sky, and of a young soul learning the mysteries that his people have guarded for countless ages. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, perhaps with a warm cup of something soothing, and let us begin our journey to the time when druids kept the balance between all things. The first light of dawn crept through the ancient Tulgi grove like a shy visitor, hesitant but welcome. Albert woke to the sound that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat over these past 3 years. The soft cooing of wood pigeons in the branches above, and beneath that the gentle whisper of wind through oak leaves. Each leaf seemed to speak its own word in a language older than human memory. He lay still for a moment, wrapped in his woolen cloak, on the bed of dried ferns and moss that served as his sleeping place. The air was cool enough to see his breath. Tiny clouds that dissolved into the morning mist. Autumn had arrived in full, painting the world in shades of gold and bronze and deep russet red. The year was turning toward its end, and with it came the most sacred time in the Druid calendar. Samhain was only 7 days away now. 7 days until the veil between this world and the other grew thin as gossamer, when the dead could walk among the living, and the ancient power stirred in the deep places of the earth. Even thinking about it made Alba's skin prickle with a mixture of anticipation and something that was not quite fear, but close. He pushed himself up slowly, mindful not to disturb the small offerings he had placed at the base of the oak tree before sleeping. 3 acorns, a sprig of mistletoe, and a cup of clear water from the sacred spring. Simple gifts, but given with true heart, and that was what mattered to the spirits who dwelled here. The grove was waking around him. Birds called to each other in the canopy high above, their songs weaving together into a tapestry of sound. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a deer barked once, sharp and clear. Albie stood and stretched, feeling his joints pop pleasantly. He was 18 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes the color of moss after rain. His face still held the smoothness of youth, but 3 years of training under Cathbad had begun to etch lines of thought and wisdom around his eyes. He wore the simple clothing of a druid apprentice. A long tunic of undyed wool bound at the waist with a leather belt. Trousers of the same rough wool and leather boots that laced up to his knees. Over all this, his cloak, which had been his mother's parting gift when he left his village to begin his training. It was deep green, the color of forest shadows, and embroidered at the hem with symbols his grandmother had stitched there. Spirals within spirals, the pattern that showed the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The first task of every day was the same. Ailbe walked barefoot to the spring that bubbled up from between 2 ancient roots at the grove's heart. The grass was cold and wet with dew, and each step left a dark footprint that faded as quickly as it was made. He knelt at the spring's edge, where the water pooled clear as glass in a basin of smooth stone. The stone had been shaped by countless hands over countless years. Druids had knelt here for generations, perhaps since the first people came to these islands. Aelba sometimes wondered about them, those long-ago druids. Had they felt the same mix of wonder and responsibility that he felt? Had they too struggled to remember all the verses and invocations that Cathbad taught him? He cupped his hands and dipped them into the water. It was shockingly cold, enough to make him gasp, but that was part of the ritual. The cold brought clarity, washed away the fog of sleep. He brought his hands to his face and splashed the water 3 times. Once for the earth beneath his feet, once for the sky above his head, once for the space between, where humans dwelt and tried their best to live in balance. Then he spoke the morning greeting, words in the old tongue that his people had spoken before the Romans came with their roads and their legions. Before even the Romans, these words had been old. I greet the rising sun who brings light to the world. I greet the earth who sustains all life. I greet the sky who holds the rain and the wind. I greet the spirits of this place who have allowed me to rest here. May my presence honor them. May my actions this day serve the balance of all things. As he spoke, he felt it, that subtle shift, like a door opening in a room you had not known was closed. The presence of the grove acknowledged him, not in words, nothing so crude as human speech, but in a feeling that settled over his shoulders like a warm hand. Approval. Welcome. You belong here, child of the earth. You are seen. Aelba smiled, still kneeling by the spring. This was why he had left his village, left his family and the life he might have had as a farmer or a smith or a trader. This connection to something vast and ancient, this sense of being part of a pattern so much larger than himself. It filled a hunger in him that no amount of food could satisfy. He heard footsteps approaching through the grove, and he knew them instantly. Cathbad walked with the slow, measured pace of a man who had learned long ago that rushing accomplished nothing of value. The sound was distinctive. A step, a pause, another step. The rhythm of someone who listened to the world with every sense. Aelba stood and turned to face his teacher. Cathbad emerged from between 2 massive oaks, looking for all the world like a part of the forest itself. He was old, perhaps 70 winters, though time was counted differently by druids. They measured life not in years, but in cycles. Planting and harvest, birth and death, the endless wheel turning. Cathbad's face was deeply lined, each wrinkle a story. A lesson learned, a truth discovered. His beard, once dark, was now white as new snow, and it flowed down past his chest. He wore robes of undyed wool, much like Aelba's, but his were embroidered with symbols of his rank. Oak leaves and spirals, crescent moons and stars. His staff was carved from ash wood, as tall as he was, and topped with a piece of quartz crystal that caught the morning light and threw tiny rainbows. But it was his eyes that always caught Aelba's attention. They were bright and clear as a young man's, full of intelligence and humor and something else. A depth that suggested he saw layers of reality that Aelba could only guess at. Good morning, young oak, Cathbad said, using the nickname he had given Elby on his first day of training. You have said your greetings? Yes, master, Ailba replied, falling into step beside the old druids as they began walking deeper into the grove. The spirits seemed pleased today. I felt their presence strongly. As well they should be, Cathbad said, nodding. You tend them properly. You make your offerings with true heart, not just empty ritual. This is important, Elby. Never forget. The spirits, the gods, the powers of this world, and the others, they can always tell the difference between words spoken from the heart and words spoken only from the mouth. They walked in comfortable silence for a time, following a path that only the druids knew. To anyone else, the grove would seem an impenetrable tangle of trees and undergrowth, but Ailba had learned to read the subtle signs. A branch bent just so, a particular arrangement of stones, the way moss grew thicker on one side of certain trees. These markers guided them to the teaching circle. The circle was a clearing perhaps 20 paces across, ringed by 9 ancient oaks. 9, the sacred number, 3 times 3. In the center grew the oldest oak of all, so massive that it would take 6 men with linked hands to encircle its trunk. Its branches spread wide enough to shade the entire clearing, and its roots ran deep into the earth, drinking from waters that flowed far below. This was Cathbad's teaching place. Under this tree, Ailby had learned the names of every plant in the forest and their uses. Here, he'd memorized the lineages of kings going back 20 generations. Here, he had first heard the great stories of the gods and heroes, the tales that formed the backbone of his people's understanding of the world. Cathbad settled himself at the base of the great oak with a satisfied sigh, arranging his robes around him. Elba sat cross-legged facing him, assuming the posture of listening that had become second nature over these 3 years. Samhain approaches, Cathbad said, and though his voice was soft, it carried a weight. The most sacred of our festivals, the time when the year dies and is born again. Tell me, young oak, what do you understand of Samhain? Elby took a breath, organizing his thoughts. This was not a simple recitation Cathbad wanted. The old druids never asked simple questions. Samhain marks the end of the light half of the year and the beginning of the dark half, he began. It is when the harvest is complete and the earth begins its rest. The cattle are brought down from the high pastures. Some are slaughtered and their meat salted and stored for winter. It is a time of gathering together, of taking stock of what we have and what we will need to survive until spring returns. Cathbad nodded but gestured for him to continue. There was more, and Ailba knew it. But it is also more than that, Ailba said, warming to his subject. Samhain is when the boundary between our world and the Otherworld grows thin. The ancestors can cross over to visit their descendants. The Sidhe, the fair folk, walk abroad. It is a night of power and danger both. We light great fires to guide the friendly spirits and to ward off those with ill intent. We leave offerings of food for our dead. We wear disguises to confuse any harmful spirits who might wish us ill. Good, Cathbad said. You have learned well, but there is something deeper still, something that goes to the very heart of what it means to be a druid, a keeper of balance. Can you sense what it is? Aelbe frowned in concentration. He thought about everything he had learned, about the wheel of the year, the cycles of nature, the relationship between the worlds, and then, like sunlight breaking through clouds, understanding came. It is about change, he said slowly, working through the idea as he spoke. Everything changes. The year changes, the seasons change, we change, even the gods change, and Samhain is when we acknowledge this truth most fully. The old year must die, so the new year can be born. We cannot cling to what was. We must let go and trust that what comes next will be as it should be. For a long moment, Cathbad said nothing. Then a smile spread across his weathered face, and his eyes shone with pride, and perhaps a glimmer of tears. "Yes," he said softly. "Yes, young oak, you begin to understand. This is the great lesson that takes some druids a lifetime to learn, and you have grasped it in 3 short years. Change is the only constant. To resist it is to cause suffering. To accept it, to move with it as water flows around stones in a stream, this is wisdom." He reached out and placed one gnarled hand on Aelbe's shoulder. "You will make a fine druids one day, perhaps finer than I ever was." Aelbe felt his chest swell with pride at the words, but also with a strange sadness, because he understood now what Cathbad was really saying. His time as an apprentice was drawing to a close. Soon, perhaps as soon as this Samhain, he would be initiated as a full druid, and with that honor came responsibility. The weight of all that knowledge, the duty to his people, the burden of walking between the worlds and keeping the balance. "Master," he said hesitantly, "I am afraid." "Of course you are," Cathbad replied matter-of-factly. "Only a fool feels no fear. But tell me, what frightens you?" "That I will not be worthy, that I will forget some crucial teaching when it matters most, that the spirits will test me and find me wanting." Cathbad chuckled, a warm sound like water over stones. "The spirits have already tested you every day for 3 years, and here you still sit. Do you think they would have allowed you to progress this far if you were unworthy? Trust in what you have learned, Aelbe. Trust in the training I have given you. But most of all, trust in yourself and in the connection you have forged with the world around you." He stood slowly, using his staff to lever himself up. "Come. We have much work to do before Samhain. There are preparations to make, offerings to gather, and I have stories yet to teach you, stories you will need to know." Aelbe rose and followed his master, feeling the autumn sun warm on his face as they left the shadows of the teaching circle. Somewhere in the branches above, a raven called 3 times, and Cathbad paused to listen. "The Morrigan sends her greetings," he said with a slight smile. "It seems the gods are taking notice of you as well, young oak. This will be a Samhain to remember." And with that cryptic comment, they walked on into the golden morning, teacher and student, druid and apprentice, 2 souls bound by the ancient ways and walking the path that generations had walked before them. Cathbad settled himself once more beneath the great oak and Aelba took his place across from him. But today, the old druid seemed different somehow, more formal, more solemn. He placed his staff across his knees and closed his eyes for a long moment, breathing deeply. "Today," Cathbad said at last, opening his eyes, "I will teach you of the three worlds. This is knowledge that forms the foundation of all druid wisdom. Without understanding the three worlds, you cannot hope to walk between them, to speak with the spirits, or to serve your people as you must." Elbe leaned forward, his full attention focused on his master. He had heard references to the three worlds before, hints and fragments, but never the complete teaching. "Picture, if you will, a great tree," Cathbad began. "Not unlike this oak beneath which we sit, but vaster still. So vast that its branches touch the sky and its roots plunge deep into the earth. This is the world tree, though some call it by other names. It connects all things, and through it flows the life force that animates everything that is." He gestured upward with one hand. "At the crown of the tree, in the highest branches where the sunlight is strongest, dwells the upper world. This is the realm of the gods, the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. Here live those beings of pure spirit and light, Lach of the long arm, master of all skills, the Dagda, the good god, whose club can slay with one end and restore life with the other, Brighid, the bright one, goddess of fire and poetry and healing." Aelbe listened, entranced. He had heard the names before, of course, in the stories that were told around winter fires. But hearing Cathbad speak of them here, in the sacred grove, made them feel immediate and real. "The upper world is a place of clarity and power," Cathbad continued. "When we call upon the gods, we reach upward to this place. When we seek wisdom from above, we climb toward the crown of the tree in our spirit vision." He lowered his hand until it was level with his chest. "Here, at the trunk of the tree, is the middle world. This is where we dwell, we humans and the animals and plants. This is the realm of the living, of breath and blood and growth. It is neither high nor low, but balanced between them. The middle world is where the druid does most of his work," the old man said. "We are the keepers of the balance here. We tend the sacred groves. We counsel kings and settle disputes. We heal the sick and speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. We are the bridge, Aelba, connecting what is above with what is below." Cathbad's hand moved down to point at the ground. "And beneath, in the deep roots that pierce the earth, is the lower world. This is the realm of the ancestors, of the ancient powers that were here before the gods themselves. Here dwell the spirits of those who have passed from life. Here are the deep waters, the caves, the hidden places where wisdom sleeps." A shiver ran down Aelbe's spine. Though the day was warm, there was something in the way Cathbad spoke of the lower world that stirred both fear and fascination. "The lower world is not evil," Cathbad said, as if reading his thoughts. "Though many misunderstand it, it is simply different. It is the place of transformation, of decay that becomes new growth. When a seed falls to earth and breaks open in the dark soil, it touches the lower world. When we bury our dead and return them to the earth, they journey to the lower world. All three worlds are necessary." he said, spreading his hands. Without the upper world, there would be no inspiration, no divine spark, no light to guide us. Without the middle world, there would be no life, no action, no place for the spirit to take form. Without the lower world, there would be no depth, no wisdom earned through experience, no place for rest and renewal. Aelbe absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. And we druids can travel between these worlds. In spirit, yes, Cathbad confirmed. Through ritual, through meditation, through the sacred plants that open the doors of perception, and most especially at times like Samhain, when the boundaries grow thin and passage becomes easier. This is part of your training, young oak, to learn to walk the world tree, to journey safely between the realms and return with wisdom. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he drew a handful of what looked like dried mushrooms, pale and small. Do you know what these are? Aelbe shook his head. These grow only in certain places, beneath certain trees, in certain seasons. They are a gift from the gods, a key that can unlock the doors between worlds. When prepared properly and consumed with the right intention, they allow the spirit to slip free of the body and travel. He returned the mushrooms to the pouch. You are not yet ready for this. Perhaps at Samhain, if the gods will it. But you must understand that such journeys are not games or entertainments. They are sacred work, and they carry risk. One can become lost in the other worlds if one is not careful. One can attract the attention of beings who do not have our best interests at heart. How does one stay safe? Aelbe asked. By knowing yourself, Cathbad replied. By being clear in your intention. By having guides, both in this world and the others, by respecting the beings you encounter and the places you visit, and by always, always remembering the way home. He stood and gestured for Aelbe to follow him to the edge of the clearing. There, a massive oak tree grew, its trunk split by lightning long ago, but still living, still reaching toward the sky with its remaining limbs. This tree is sacred to us, Cathbad said. See how it has been wounded, yet it lives. See how new growth emerges from the old damage. This is the way of all things. We are wounded by life, by loss, by change. But if we root ourselves deep in the earth and reach always toward the light, we survive. We grow. We become something new. He placed his hand on the scarred trunk. When you journey between the worlds, remember this tree. It is your anchor, your connection to the middle world. No matter how far you travel, in spirit you can always find your way back by remembering this tree and what it represents. Aelbe stepped forward and placed his own hand on the trunk. The bark was rough beneath his palm, warm from the sun. He could feel something else too, a subtle vibration like a heartbeat. The tree was alive, deeply alive, and it welcomed his touch. I feel it, he whispered. Good, Cathbad said softly. You are learning to sense what lies beneath the surface of things. This is the druid's gift. We see the connections that others miss. We hear the songs that others cannot hear. We walk between the worlds and serve as messengers and mediators. They spent the rest of the morning discussing the 4 elements. Fire, which brought warmth and transformation and the spark of inspiration. Water, which flowed and adapted and cleansed, earth which was solid and stable and nurturing, air which carried thought and breath and change. Each element had its place in the three worlds. Fire reached toward the upper world, burning bright like the sun. Earth belonged to the lower world, deep and dark and fertile. Water and air moved between them, connecting, flowing, changing. A druid must understand all four elements, Cathbad explained, must learn to work with each one, to call upon their powers when needed. Fire for purification and illumination, water for healing and scrying, earth for grounding and growth, air for clarity and communication. As the sun climbed toward noon, they turned to the subject of sacred animals. Each creature that walked, swam, flew, or crawled had its own wisdom to offer, its own medicine, as Cathbad called it. The bear, he said, teaches us about strength and introspection. Bears sleep through the winter, entering a deep rest in the darkness. They emerge in spring renewed. When we call upon the bear, we ask for courage and the wisdom to know when to act and when to withdraw. The wolf teaches us about loyalty and cunning. Wolves hunt in packs, working together. They are fierce protectors of their own. When we call upon the wolf, we ask for the strength of community and the intelligence to outthink our challenges. The stag, Cathbad continued, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone, is one of our most sacred animals. The stag moves between the worlds with ease. His antlers are like the branches of the world tree reaching toward the heavens. In autumn he sheds them, and in spring they grow back larger than before. He teaches us about sacrifice and renewal, about the cycles of death and rebirth. Aelbe thought of the deer he had heard that morning, its sharp bark in the forest. Had it been a messenger, a sign? And the salmon, Cathbad said, the salmon of wisdom who swims in the sacred pools. It is said that the salmon eat the hazelnuts that fall from the 9 hazel trees that grow over the well of wisdom. By eating these nuts, the salmon gained all knowledge. This is why we druids honor the salmon and seek them out when we need deep understanding. By the time Cathbad finished speaking of the animals, the sun was high overhead. Aelbe's head swam with information. Bears and wolves, stags and salmon, eagles and ravens and serpents. Each one a teacher. Each one a doorway to understanding. Rest now, Cathbad said kindly. You have learned much today. Let it settle in your mind like silt in still water. We will speak more this evening. Aelbe nodded gratefully. He found a comfortable spot against the base of the great oak and closed his eyes. The autumn sun was warm on his face, and the breeze rustled the leaves overhead with a sound like distant conversation. As he drifted towards sleep, his mind full of images of trees and animals and the 3 worlds stacked one upon another, he felt something shift in his awareness. It was subtle, like turning your head and catching a glimpse of something from the corner of your eye. Suddenly, he was no longer in the grove, or rather he was in the grove, but it was different. The colors were brighter, more vivid. The air itself seemed to shimmer with golden light. And standing before him, where a moment ago there had been empty space, was a stag. It was magnificent, Its coat was the red gold of autumn leaves, and its antlers branched like the crown of an oak tree. But it was the eyes that held Alba transfixed. They were dark and deep and knowing, and looking into them, Alby felt as if the stag could see straight through to his soul. "Welcome, young druid," the stag said, and though its mouth did not move, Elba heard the words clearly in his mind. "You are learning to see. This is good. When the time comes, when the veil grows thin at Samhain, remember me. I will guide you if you have the courage to follow." Ailby tried to speak, to ask what the stag meant, but before he could form words, the vision faded. He blinked and gasped, finding himself back in the ordinary grove, his heart pounding. Cathbad was watching him with a knowing smile. "Your first true vision," he said. "I felt it happen. The stag came to you." "Yes," Elba managed. "He spoke to me. He said he would guide me at Samhain." "Then you are blessed indeed," Cathbad said. "The stag is a powerful ally. Trust in him and he will lead you true. But remember, young oak, visions and journeys between the worlds are not the goal. They are tools, nothing more. The goal is always to serve the balance, to help your people, to keep the old ways alive. Never forget this." Albe nodded, still trembling slightly from the intensity of the experience. He understood now why Cathbad had waited 3 years before beginning this teaching. He had needed that time to build a foundation, to root himself firmly in the middle world before attempting to travel beyond it. "Come," Cathbad said, rising once more. "Let us walk to the village. There are people who need our counsel, and tomorrow we will continue your lessons. The 3 worlds are vast, and we have only begun to explore them." As they left the grove, Ailbe looked back once at the lightning-struck oak. It stood solid and enduring, its roots deep in the earth, its remaining branches reaching towards the sky. Like the world tree itself, he thought, connecting all things, and for the first time since beginning his training, he felt truly ready for what was to come. As they walked, Cathbad pointed out various plants and explained their uses. A patch of mugwort growing beside a fallen log, good for dreams and visions when burned as incense. A cluster of yarrow with its tiny white flowers, powerful for stopping bleeding and healing wounds. Wild garlic in a shady hollow, which protected against evil spirits and was excellent in cooking besides. A druid must know the plants as well as he knows the stars, Cathbad said. They are our allies, our teachers, our medicine. The earth provides everything we need if we have eyes to see and wisdom to use it properly. After perhaps an hour of walking, they emerged from the forest onto higher ground. Before them, the land rolled away in gentle hills, and atop the nearest rise stood the tribal stronghold. It was a hill fort, one of many scattered across Britannia, where the people gathered for protection and community. The fort was surrounded by deep ditches and high earthen walls topped with wooden palisades. Within those walls, Ailbe could see the smoke from many cooking fires rising into the clear sky. The afternoon sun glinted off spear points where warriors kept watch from the ramparts. As they approached the main gate, the guards recognized them immediately and called out greetings. "Master Cathbad, young Ailbe, Welcome, welcome. The chieftain will be pleased to see you." The gate swung open, massive timbers bound with iron, and they passed through into the bustling life of the settlement. The hill fort was like a small town unto itself. Round houses with thatch roofs clustered together, smoke rising from the hole in each roof where the central fire burned. Children ran between the buildings, their laughter bright as bells. Women sat in doorways spinning wool or grinding grain. Men worked at various crafts, the ring of hammer on anvil carrying from the blacksmith's forge. Everyone they passed stopped to bow or nod respectfully to Cathbad. The druid was not just a holy man, but a figure of immense authority. He was counselor, judge, historian, and keeper of the sacred knowledge. His word carried more weight than the chieftain's in many matters, for while the chieftain ruled the people, the druid served the gods and the natural order. They made their way to the great hall at the fort center. It was the largest building Alba had ever seen, a massive round house easily 50 paces across. The walls were made of wattle and daub, woven branches covered with a mixture of mud and straw. The roof was thatched with reeds, rising to a point high overhead. 2 carved wooden pillars flanked the entrance, each one depicting scenes from the old stories. Gods and heroes, battles and feasts, all entwined with spirals and knots that had no beginning and no end. Inside, the hall was dim after the bright sunlight, but warm and welcoming. A fire burned in a great pit at the center, the smoke rising to escape through the hole in the roof. Around the walls, benches and sleeping platforms were arranged. Shields and weapons hung from the support posts, and colorful woven hangings decorated the spaces between. Seated on a carved wooden chair near the fire was the chieftain, Brennus. He was a man in his prime, perhaps 40 years old, tall and powerfully built. His hair was dark, with threads of gray, worn long and pulled back from his face. A thick beard covered his jaw, and his arms bore the swirling tattoos that marked him as a warrior and a leader. He wore trousers of fine wool dyed a deep blue, a tunic of linen, and over it all a cloak held at the shoulder with a massive bronze brooch shaped like a boar. When he saw Cathbad enter, Brennus rose and came forward with both hands extended in greeting. "Master Cathbad and young Ailba, this is an honor. I had not expected you today, but you are most welcome. Come, sit by the fire. You must be thirsty from your walk." He clapped his hands, and servants hurried forward with cups of ale and wooden platters of bread and cheese. Cathbad settled onto a bench with a grateful sigh, and Ailba sat beside him, accepting a cup with thanks. "We have come to speak with you about Samhain," Cathbad said after taking a long drink. "There are preparations that must be made, and I would coordinate with you to ensure all is ready." Brennus nodded seriously. "Of course. What do you need from us?" "The great fire must be prepared on the hilltop to the west," Cathbad said. "It must be large enough to be seen from the surrounding countryside. All the households will extinguish their fires that night and relight them from the sacred flame." "I will have my men gather wood," Brennus said. "Enough for a fire that will burn all night." "Good. And there must be food prepared for the feast. not just for the living, but for the dead who will walk among us. Set aside portions for them, offerings to honor their memory." As they discussed the practical arrangements, other people began filtering into the hall. Word had spread quickly that the Druids were here, and those with questions or problems came seeking counsel. First came a woman named Madb, her face lined with worry. She bowed to Cathbad, and then spoke quickly, her words tumbling over each other in her anxiety. "Master Cathbad, I need your wisdom. My husband and my brother have a dispute over land boundaries. They are both good men, but they are stubborn as bulls. They will not listen to each other, and I fear they will come to blows. Can you help?" Cathbad listened patiently, asking questions to understand the full situation. Where was the disputed land? What were the boundaries they each claimed? Had there been any witnesses when the original division was made? After hearing both sides, for the brother arrived shortly after to present his case, Cathbad closed his eyes for a long moment. Ailbe watched, fascinated, as the old druid's face became still and distant, as if he listened to voices no one else could hear. Then Cathbad opened his eyes and spoke with quiet authority. "The boundary shall be marked by the old hawthorn tree on the hill's east slope. This tree has stood for longer than any living memory. It was already ancient when your grandfather's grandfather was young. Let this be the marker, and let neither of you dispute it further." The two men looked at each other, then slowly nodded. The hawthorn was indeed ancient and well known as a landmark. It was a fair division, and both could accept it without losing face. "Thank you, master," they said in unison, and departed with their disagreements settled. Next came a young couple, barely more than children themselves, seeking Cathbad's blessing for their upcoming marriage. The druid spoke with them kindly, asking about their plans and their hopes for the future. He gave them advice about partnership and mutual respect, about the importance of patience and communication. Then he placed his hands on their heads and spoke a blessing in the old tongue, asking the gods to smile upon their union. As the afternoon wore on, more people came with their concerns. A farmer whose best cow had fallen ill. A merchant who wanted to know if the omens were favorable for a trading journey. An elderly woman who complained of pain in her joints and wanted a remedy. For each one, Cathbad had wisdom to offer or healing to provide. Ailbe watched and learned, seeing how his master moved seamlessly between roles. Counselor, healer, judge, priest. The druid was all these things and more. During a brief lull, another druid entered the hall. She was a woman of middle years, with auburn hair streaked with silver and eyes the color of spring leaves. Her robes were embroidered with symbols of healing, spirals and crescents, herbs and flowers. This was Brigid, named for the goddess she served, and she was the most skilled healer in the region. "Cathbad," she greeted him warmly. "And young Ailbe, look how you have grown. Soon you will be taller than your master." "Brigid," Cathbad replied with obvious affection. "It gladdens my heart to see you. Are you well?" "Well enough," she said, settling onto the bench beside them. Though I am run ragged with this cough that is going through the children, nothing serious, but it keeps them awake at night and their mothers beside themselves with worry. Have you been giving them the honey and thyme mixture? Cathbad asked. Of course, and it helps. But there are so many, and I can only be in one place at a time. She turned to Elba with a smile. Perhaps your young apprentice could assist me. It would be good practice for him, and I could use another pair of hands. Elba looked to Cathbad, who nodded. It would indeed be good for him. He knows the healing herbs well. Go with Braghid tomorrow, Eilby, and learn from her. The healing arts are sacred to our tradition. Before they could discuss it further, the hall fell suddenly quiet. A new arrival stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light. As he stepped inside, Elba saw he was a young man, perhaps only a few years older than himself, dressed in the garb of a traveling bard. He wore a cloak of many colors over a fine tunic, and he carried a small harp made of yew wood. Greetings to all, the young man said, his voice clear and musical. I am Donald, son of Fergus, a bard newly come from the eastern tribes. I carry news and stories, and I seek shelter and welcome. Brennus stood immediately. You are welcome here, bard. Come, sit and refresh yourself. News is always welcome, especially in these times. Donald came forward and accepted a cup of ale. His eyes swept the hall and lingered on Cathbad with recognition and respect. Bards and druids were brother traditions, both keepers of the oral histories and sacred stories, though bards focused more on the entertainment and memorization, while druids delved deeper into the mysteries. What news do you bring? Brennus asked. Donald's face grew serious. Troubling news, I fear. The Romans are building new forts along the southern coast. Their legions grow bolder, pushing further into our lands. And they bring with them a strange new religion, speaking of a god who was killed and rose again. A murmur ran through the gathered people. The Romans had been a distant threat for years, but if they were truly pushing northward, that threat was becoming real. Cathbad's expression was grave. This is indeed troubling, but not unexpected. Empires rise and fall, religions come and go. What matters is that we remain true to our ways, that we pass on the knowledge and wisdom to those who come after. He looked at Eilby, and in that look the young druid apprentice saw sadness mixed with determination. This was part of what Cathbad had been preparing him for. The world was changing, and the old ways would face challenges. But as long as someone remembered, as long as the stories were told and the sacred groves were tended, the wisdom would survive. But come, Brennus said, trying to lighten the mood. You are a bard, Donald. Surely you have stories as well as news. Will you honor us with a tale? Donald smiled, his face brightening. With pleasure. What would you hear? A story of heroes, of gods, of love, or adventure? Tell us of the Dagda, called someone from the back of the hall. Tell us of his harp and his club. Aye, a fine choice, Donald said. He settled himself more comfortably, took a drink from his cup, and began to tune his small harp. The sound of the strings being plucked filled the hall sweet and clear. Long ago, before the world was as we know it now, Donald began, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality of a practiced storyteller, there lived a god called the Dagda, which means the good god. And he was called good not because he was kind, though sometimes he was, but because he was good at everything. Good at fighting, good at feasting, good at magic, good at fathering children. There was nothing the Dagda could not do if he set his mind to it. Elbe listened, enchanted. This was the power of the bard's art, this ability to transport listeners to another time and place with nothing but words and music. He watched Donald's fingers dance across the harp strings, underscoring his words with melody. The Dagda had two great treasures, Donald continued. The first was his club, so large and heavy that it took 8 strong men to carry it on a wheeled cart. One end of this club could slay 9 men with a single blow, but the other end could restore the dead to life. With one side, the Dagda could deal death. With the other, he could grant life. And so, he kept the balance, as all must do. The listeners murmured in appreciation. This was a teaching story as well as an entertaining one, reminding them of the importance of balance. His second treasure was a harp made of oak, strung with the hair of a goddess. When the Dagda played this harp, he could control the very seasons themselves. He had 3 magical songs, you see. The first was the sleep song, which could lull anyone who heard it into peaceful slumber. The second was the sorrow song, which brought tears to the hardest heart. And the third was the joy song, which made everyone leap and dance with happiness. As Donald spoke, his fingers moved across his own small harp, and Elba could almost hear the 3 songs the Dagda played. A slow, gentle melody for sleep, a haunting, melancholy tune for sorrow, and finally, a bright, lively jig for joy. One winter, Donald said, the Fomorians, those dark beings of chaos and destruction, stole the Dagda's harp. They took it to their hall beneath the sea and hung it on their wall as a trophy. Without his harp, the Dagda could not bring spring. Winter stretched on, and the people suffered in the cold and dark. Aelbe leaned forward, caught up in the story, even though he had heard versions of it before. This was the bard's skill, making even familiar tales feel fresh and immediate. So the Dagda gathered his warriors and journeyed to the hall of the Fomorians. He found his harp hanging on their wall, covered with dust and cobwebs. He called to it, and the harp flew from the wall into his hands. Then he played the sleep song, and all the Fomorians fell into deep slumber. While they slept, the Dagda and his warriors escaped, and when they reached the surface, the Dagda played the joy song, and spring returned to the land. As Donald finished, he struck a final triumphant chord on his harp. The hall erupted in applause and cheers. It was a good story, well told, and it reminded everyone of the power of music and magic, of cleverness over brute strength. "Well done, Bard," Cathbad said warmly. "You have the gift. Your father would be proud." Donald bowed his head in acknowledgement of the praise. "Thank you, Master Druid. It is an honor to share these stories. They must not be forgotten." "No," Cathbad agreed quietly. "They must not, and that is why we tell them, again and again, passing them from one generation to the next, Stories are how we remember who we are. As the evening drew on and the fire burned low, people began drifting back to their homes. Brennus offered Cathbad and Aelbert sleeping spaces in the hall, but the old druid declined. "We must return to the grove," he said. "There is work yet to be done before Samhain. But we thank you for your hospitality." They left the hill fort as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The autumn air was cool and fresh after the warmth of the hall. As they walked, Aelbert thought about everything he had witnessed that day. The settling of disputes, the healing of ailments, the sharing of stories. This was the Druids' work, he realized. Not just ritual and magic, though those were part of it, but service to the community, keeping the people connected to each other and to the old ways. "You are thoughtful, young oak," Cathbad observed. "I was thinking about today," Aelby said, "about how many different roles you filled. Counselor, healer, judge, keeper of stories. How do you balance it all?" Cathbad smiled. "By remembering that it is all one thing. Healing the body, healing relationships, healing the connection between people and the land and the gods. It is all the same work, all part of maintaining the balance. This is what it means to be a druid." They walked on through the gathering dusk, and overhead the first stars began to appear. 7 more days until Samhain, Aelbert thought. 7 more days until the veil would thin and he would be tested. But after today, he felt more ready, more certain of his path. The grove welcomed them back like an old friend, and they settled by the fire to rest. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, but tonight Aelbert felt at peace, surrounded by the ancient trees and the wisdom of his teacher, walking the path that so many had walked before him. "We go to the river today," the old druid announced. "There is a ritual that must be performed before Samhain arrives. The water spirits must be honored, and offerings must be made to ensure their favor through the dark months ahead." They gathered what they would need for the ceremony. Cathbad had spent part of the previous evening making small cakes from barley flour and honey, shaped like spirals and marked with sacred symbols. These went into a leather bag, along with a bronze dagger, a clay bowl, and several sprigs of vervain and meadowsweet. The walk to the river took most of the morning. They followed deer trails through the forest, crossing meadows where the grass was brown and brittle with the season's change. Once they startled a fox from its hunting, and it paused to regard them with bright, intelligent eyes before vanishing into the undergrowth. "The fox is clever," Cathbad observed. "She knows how to survive, how to adapt. There is wisdom in watching the animals, Aelby. They live in harmony with the natural order in ways we humans often forget." The river, when they reached it, was a wide, slow-moving body of water that wound through the landscape like a silver serpent. Ancient willows grew along its banks, their long branches trailing in the current. The water was dark and deep here, and Aelby could feel the power of it, the sense of something ancient and knowing flowing past. There was a place where the river formed a pool deep and still, sheltered by overhanging rocks. This was the sacred site, marked by stones that had been placed there by druids long ago. Each stone was carved with spirals and other symbols, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain and the touch of countless hands. Cathbad set down his burden and stood for a moment in silence, his eyes closed, his lips moving in a prayer too soft for Elbert to hear. Then he opened his eyes and began to prepare the space. "First we must purify ourselves," he said. "Water is sacred, Albi. It is the blood of the earth flowing through the land as blood flows through our bodies. It cleanses, it nourishes, it transforms. Before we can ask the water spirits for their blessing, we must make ourselves clean." He gestured for Ailbe to approach the water's edge. The young druid stepped forward hesitantly. The day was cool, and the water looked cold indeed. "Remove your outer garments," Cathbad instructed. "You need not go fully naked, but you must enter the water." Ailbe stripped off his cloak and tunic, standing in only his trousers. His skin prickled with goosebumps in the autumn air. Cathbad did the same, and Ailbe was struck by how thin and frail his master looked without his robes. The old man's ribs showed clearly beneath papery skin, and his arms were stick-thin. Yet there was a strength in him still, a core of iron that age had not diminished. Together they waded into the pool. The water was shockingly cold, so cold that Ailbe gasped and nearly stumbled. But Cathbad moved forward steadily until the water reached his chest, and Ailbe followed, gritting his teeth against the cold. "Feel the water," Cathbad said. "Feel how it holds you, supports you. Let it wash away all that is not needed, all fear, all doubt, all distraction. Let the river take it downstream and carry it away." Ailbe tried to do as instructed, though it was difficult to focus on anything beyond the numbing cold. But gradually, as he stood in the water, something shifted. The cold became less uncomfortable and more invigorating. He could feel the current flowing past his body, gentle but insistent, and with it, something did seem to wash away. The tension he had been carrying in his shoulders. The anxiety about Samhain and his upcoming initiation. It all flowed downstream, leaving him feeling lighter, cleaner, more present. "Now," Cathbad said, "we give thanks." He dipped his hands into the water and brought them up to wash his face, speaking as he did so. "Thank you, Spirit of the River, for your gift of water. Thank you for flowing through our land, bringing life and fertility. Thank you for the fish that swim in your depths and the reeds that grow on your banks. Thank you for accepting our dead when we return them to you, and for your patience with us, who too often forget your importance." Ailbe copied his master's actions, speaking his own thanks. As he did, he felt something respond. It was like the presence he had felt in the grove, but different. Where the grove felt solid and rooted, the river felt fluid and dynamic, constantly moving, constantly changing. It was a living thing, this river, and it was aware of them. They emerged from the water, shivering but somehow warmer inside. Cathbad produced a cloth from his bag, and they dried themselves as best they could before dressing again. Then the real ceremony began. Cathbad arranged the offerings on a flat stone by the water's edge, the honey cakes gleaming golden in the dim light. Sprigs of vervain, sacred to all water magic, meadowsweet, which grew along the riverbank and was beloved of the water spirits. And then, from a separate pouch, he drew out something that made Elba's eyes widen. It was a sword. Not a weapon for fighting, but a ceremonial blade, beautifully made. The bronze gleamed despite its obvious age, and the hilt was decorated with intricate knotwork. This was treasure, the kind of thing a wealthy warrior might carry into battle or display in his hall. This belonged to a chieftain who died last spring, Cathbad explained. He was a good man, just in his rule, brave in battle, generous to his people. In his will he asked that his sword be given to the river as an offering. It is a great gift, and the water spirits will honor him for it. Albert understood. Among his people, it was common to throw precious objects into rivers and lakes as offerings to the gods and spirits. Swords, shields, jewelry, cauldrons. The water would keep them safe, preserve them in its depths, and in return the spirits would look favorably upon the people. Cathbad lifted the sword in both hands, holding it high overhead. His voice rang out, strong and clear, speaking words in the old tongue that Ailbe was still learning to understand. He called upon the river spirit by name, upon the goddess who embodied flowing water, upon the ancestors who had made offerings here before them. Then, in a sudden smooth motion, he threw the sword. It arced through the air, bronze flashing, and hit the water with a splash that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet morning. For a moment, Albert could see it sinking, see the light catching on the blade as it descended. Then it was gone, swallowed by the dark water, accepted by the river. "It is done," Cathbad said with satisfaction. "The spirits are pleased." He turned to the other offerings. The honey cakes he broke into pieces and scattered on the water, watching them float downstream. The herbs he bundled together and weighted with a stone, then lowered them into the pool to rest on the bottom. Each action was accompanied by prayers and invocations, words that Ailbe listened to carefully, knowing he would need to remember them. As Cathbad worked, Ailbe found his attention drawn to the water itself. He stared into its dark depths, watching the way the current moved, the patterns of light and shadow. And as he watched, something strange began to happen. The water seemed to grow transparent. He could see deeper and deeper past rocks and fish and tangled weeds, down to the bottom where the sword lay gleaming. And then deeper still past the bottom, into something else entirely. He saw a hall beneath the water, vast and beautiful. Pillars of green stone rose to support a roof that seemed made of flowing water itself. Creatures moved through this hall, beings that were human shaped but clearly not human. Their skin was the color of river stones, their hair like waterweed, their eyes as dark as the deep places. They turned to look at him, and Ailbe felt their awareness like a physical touch. One of them, a woman perhaps, though it was hard to tell, moved closer. When she spoke, her voice was like the sound of water over rocks. "You see us, young druid. Few have that gift anymore. You are learning to walk between the worlds. This is good. When Samhain comes, remember us. Remember that the boundaries are everywhere, not just in the groves and hilltops. Water is a doorway, too. Through us, you can travel far. Ailbe wanted to respond, to ask questions, but the vision was already fading. The transparent quality of the water was gone, replaced by the ordinary dark surface. He blinked and swayed suddenly dizzy. Cathbad's hand steadied him. "Another vision," the old druid said. It was not a question. "You are opening up, Ailbe. Your inner sight is awakening. This will happen more and more as Samhain approaches. Do not fear it. Trust what you see." "I saw them," Ailbe whispered. "The water spirits, they spoke to me." "Of course they did," Cathbad said calmly. "We honored them with our offerings. It is only natural that they would respond." "What did they say?" Ailbe related the conversation, or what he could remember of it. Cathbad listened intently, nodding. "They are right," he said when Ailbe finished. "Water is indeed a doorway. Rivers and lakes and the sea, they all connect to the Otherworld in their own way. This is knowledge that will serve you well." They spent the rest of the afternoon by the river. Cathbad taught Ailbe the proper prayers for different situations. Prayers for when someone was sick and needed healing water. Prayers for when a child was to be blessed. Prayers for when the dead were returned to the river. Each prayer had its own rhythm, its own melody, and Ailbe worked to commit them to memory. "Why is it," Ailbe asked at one point, "that we do not write these prayers down? It would be easier to remember them if we had them written." Cathbad shook his head firmly. "Written words are dead words, frozen in a single form. But spoken words live and breathe. They change with the speaker, adapt to the situation. The power is in the speaking, not in the symbols on a page." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Besides, when knowledge is written, it can fall into the wrong hands. It can be stolen, misused, distorted. But knowledge passed from teacher to student, mouth to ear, heart to heart, the knowledge remains pure. It is protected by the relationship between teacher and student, by the years of training required to understand it properly." "But what if it is forgotten?" Ailbe asked. "What if someday there are no more druids to pass it on?" A shadow passed over Cathbad's face. "Then it will be forgotten, and perhaps that will be as it should be. All things have their time, Ailbe, even the old ways, but we do our best to pass on what we know, and we trust that what is meant to survive will survive." They made their way back to the grove as the sun was setting. The promised storm had not yet arrived, but the air felt charged and heavy. Lightning flickered on the western horizon, and thunder rumbled in the distance like the voice of angry gods. That night, they ate a simple meal of bread and dried fish, washing it down with water from the sacred spring. As they sat by the fire, Cathbad spoke of the role of sacrifice in druid practice. "Our ancestors believed that the gods required blood," he said, staring into the flames. "Human sacrifice was practiced, though less often than the Romans claim. A criminal might be executed as an offering to ensure justice. A volunteer might give their life in times of great need to save the people. Ailbe shifted uncomfortably. He had heard stories of wicker men, great figures woven from branches and filled with sacrifices, then burned. The thought made him queasy. Cathbad seemed to sense his discomfort. Those days are passing, young oak. We have learned that the gods do not need blood to be satisfied. They want our devotion, yes, our respect and our offerings. But these can be given in other ways. A sword thrown into the river, as we did today. A beautiful poem composed in their honor. A life lived in balance and service. The true sacrifice, he continued, is not of others but of ourselves. We sacrifice our comfort when we sit in meditation through a cold night. We sacrifice our pride when we admit we do not know something. We sacrifice our attachments when we let go of what must be released. This is the sacrifice the gods truly desire, the transformation of the self. Ailbe absorbed this teaching, adding it to all the others he had gathered over the years. He was beginning to see how everything connected. The three worlds, the four elements, the sacred animals and plants, the rituals and prayers, they all wove together into a comprehensive understanding of how the world worked and how humans fit into it. Tomorrow, Cathbad said, you will go with Brigid to tend the sick children. I will remain here to prepare for Samhain. There is much to do, and time grows short. Yes, master, Ailbe said that night. As he lay wrapped in his cloak, Ailbe listened to the storm finally arrive. Rain drummed on the leaves overhead, and wind made the trees creak and groan. Lightning flashed, illuminating the grove in stark white light, and thunder cracked like the splitting of worlds. But Ailbe was not afraid. He felt safe here, protected by the ancient oaks and by the knowledge he was gaining. The storm was just another expression of the natural order, another face of the divine. It brought destruction, yes, but also cleansing. It watered the earth and washed away the old to make room for the new. As he drifted toward sleep, he thought of the water spirits in their hole beneath the river, of the stag with his knowing eyes, of all the beings that existed just beyond the veil of ordinary perception, waiting for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. 6 more days until Samhain. 6 more days until the veil would part and he would walk between the worlds as a true druid. He was ready, he thought. Or at least, he would be. The storm raged on through the night, and Ailbe slept deeply, his dreams full of flowing water and ancient songs. Ailbe found Brigid waiting for him at the edge of the grove just after sunrise. She had brought a donkey laden with leather bags and clay pots, her healing supplies. Her face was kind but weary, and Ailbe realized she had probably been up half the night tending to someone in need. "Good morning, young druid," she said warmly. "Are you ready for a day of real work? Healing is not as dramatic as prophecy or ritual, but it is perhaps the most important thing we do." "I am ready," Ailbe assured her, falling into step beside the donkey as they began walking towards the hill fort. As they traveled, Brigid taught him about the illness affecting the children. "It is a cough that settles in the chest," she explained. "Not dangerous in most cases, but it makes breathing difficult and sleep impossible. The children cry all night and their mothers are exhausted. We must ease their suffering and help their small bodies fight off the sickness. She reached into one of her bags and pulled out a clay pot sealed with wax. This is my base mixture, honey, from the monastery hives, mixed with crushed thyme leaves and a bit of horehound. The honey soothes the throat, the thyme loosens the congestion, and the horehound helps the lungs clear themselves. But, she continued, healing is not just about the herbs, Elbe. You must also tend to the spirit. A sick child is frightened. Their mother is worried. You must bring calm and confidence along with your medicine. Sometimes the belief that they will get better is as powerful as any remedy. They reached the hill fort to find several mothers already waiting near the gate, children in their arms or clinging to their skirts. The little ones looked miserable indeed, their eyes red-rimmed, their faces pale. Some coughed as Ailbe and Brigid approached, harsh barking sounds that made Ailbe's own chest ache in sympathy. Brigid set up her workspace in the yard near the main well, where there was room for everyone and fresh water close at hand. She spread a clean cloth on the ground and arranged her supplies with practiced efficiency. Then she called the first mother forward. "Come, Deirdre, let me see your little Finn," she said gently. The woman came forward, carrying a boy of perhaps 3 years. He buried his face in his mother's shoulder, peeking out at the strangers with wary eyes. Brigid smiled at him. "Hello, brave Finn. I hear you have not been feeling well. Will you let me listen to your chest?" The boy shook his head, clinging tighter to his mother. "Ilba," Brigid said, "sing something. Children love music, and it will help him relax." Ailbe was surprised, but did as instructed. He thought for a moment, then began to sing a simple tune that his own mother had sung to him when he was small. It was about a little bird who flew too far from home and had to find his way back, guided by the stars and the voices of his family calling him. As he sang, he watched the boy's face. Slowly, the tension eased. The child's eyes grew curious rather than fearful. By the time Ailbe finished the first verse, Finn had turned to face them, listening intently. "That was lovely," Brigid said. "Now, Finn, while Ailbe sings another verse, I am just going to listen to your breathing. It will not hurt at all." She placed her ear against the boy's back, listening carefully as Ailbe sang. After a moment, she nodded and straightened. "His lungs are clear enough," she told Deirdre. "The cough has not gone deep. That is good. We will give him the honey mixture 3 times a day, and I want you to keep steam near him. Boil water with pine needles in it and let him breathe the vapor. It will help open his airways." She measured out a portion of the honey mixture into a smaller pot and handed it to the mother, along with careful instructions. Then she gave Finn a small piece of honeycomb to suck on, which delighted the boy and brought a real smile to his face. "Thank you, Brigid," Deirdre said gratefully. "And thank you, young druid. Your song calmed him better than anything I have tried." As the morning progressed, Ailbe saw the same process repeated again and again. Each child was examined carefully. Some needed stronger medicine than others. One little girl had developed a fever, along with the cough, and Brigid prepared a special tea from willow bark and elderflower to bring it down. Another boy had such severe congestion that Brigid made a poultice of mustard seed and warm oil to place on his chest. But always, always, there was the attention to the spirit as well as the body. Brigid spoke to each child by name, asked about their toys and their games, made them laugh when she could. She reassured worried mothers and gave them practical advice about sleep and nutrition and keeping the air in their homes moist and clean. Aelba helped where he could, grinding herbs in the mortar and pestle, measuring out doses, and most often singing or telling stories to keep the children calm. He discovered he had a knack for it, for making the little ones smile and forget their discomfort, even if only for a moment. By midday, they had seen perhaps 20 children, and Brigid's supplies were running low. They shared a meal of bread and cheese that one of the grateful mothers brought them, washing it down with cool water from the well. "You did well today," Brigid told him as they ate. "You have a good manner with children. That is a gift, Aelbi. Not all druids have it." "I enjoyed it," Aelba admitted. "I thought I would find healing work tedious compared to prophecy and ritual. But there is something deeply satisfying about easing suffering, about seeing a mother's face relax when you tell her child will be well." "That," Brigid said, pointing at him with a piece of bread, "is the heart of it. We serve the people, Aelbi, not ourselves, not our own desire for power or recognition, but the people. When you understand that, truly understand it, then you are ready to be a druid." They finished their work in the early afternoon and began the journey back. But instead of returning directly to the grove, Brigid led them along a different path through meadows golden with late-season flowers. "I want to gather some herbs while the day is fine," she explained. "Winter will be here soon, and I need to replenish my stocks." She taught Aelba as they walked, pointing out plants and explaining their uses. "Yarrow here, see? Excellent for stopping bleeding. You crush the fresh leaves and apply them directly to a wound. And over there, that tall plant with the purple flowers, that is comfrey. The root makes the best poultice for broken bones. It helps them knit back together." They gathered what they needed, Brigid cutting the plants with a small bronze knife and murmuring thanks to each one as she did so. "Plants are living beings," she reminded Aelba. "They give themselves to us for healing. The least we can do is acknowledge their sacrifice and take only what we need." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they made their way back to the hill fort. The evening meal would be served soon in the great hall, and Brennus had extended an invitation for them to join the feast. The hall was already filling with people when they arrived. Warriors and farmers, craftsmen and merchants, all gathering for the communal meal that happened most evenings. It was a time for sharing news, settling minor disputes, and simply enjoying each other's company. Aelba and Brigid were given places of honor near the fire, close to where Brennus sat with his family. The food was simple but abundant. Stew made with mutton and root vegetables, fresh bread, still warm from the baking, wheels of hard cheese and butter, apples from the orchard, crisp and sweet, and of course ale, flowing freely from large clay jugs. As people ate and talked, Alba noticed Donald the Bard taking a seat nearby, his harp cradled in his arms. The young man caught his eye and smiled. "Alby, was it not? The Druid apprentice?" Donald said. "I have been hoping to speak with you. I have questions about the old stories, the ones that go back before memory." "I will answer what I can," Alba replied, though he felt somewhat inadequate. He was still learning those stories himself. Before they could continue, Brennus stood and raised his cup high. The hall gradually fell silent, all eyes turning to the chieftain. "Ah, friends," Brennus said, his voice carrying easily through the space. "We are blessed this evening to have with us not one but 2 druids and a bard as well. It seems fitting with Samhain approaching that we should hear the old tales. Donald, will you honor us with a story?" Donald stood and bowed. "I would be honored, Lord Brennus. What tale would please you?" "Tell us of Lugh," called someone from the crowd. "Tell us how he defeated the Fomorians at the Battle of Moytura." "A fine choice," Donald agreed. He took a moment to tune his harp, the sweet notes silencing the last whispers. Then he began. "Long ago, when the world was young and the gods walked openly upon the earth, there came a great war. On one side stood the Tuatha de Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, fair and skilled in all the arts. On the other side stood the Fomorians, beings of chaos and destruction, who came from the deep waters and sought to enslave all the land." His fingers danced across the harp strings, creating a melody that somehow sounded like the clash of arms and the roar of battle. The Tuatha de Danann were led by their king, Nuada of the Silver Arm, so called because he had lost his arm in an earlier battle, and the healers had made him a new one of silver that worked as well as flesh and bone. But even with Nuada's leadership, the Fomorians were winning. They were too many, too strong, too savage. Ailbe listened, entranced. He knew this story, had heard versions of it from Cathbad, but Donald's telling brought it alive in a new way. Then, one day, a young man came to the court of the Tuatha de Danann. He was tall and fair, with hair like sunlight and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. He called himself Lugh, which means the Shining One, and he sought to join the king's warriors. The gatekeeper stopped him, as was the custom. "What skill do you have?" the gatekeeper asked. "For only those with exceptional skill may enter the king's hall." "I am a carpenter," Lugh replied. "We have carpenters," said the gatekeeper. "I am a smith," Lugh said. "We have smiths," replied the gatekeeper. "I am a warrior," Lugh continued. "We have many warriors," the gatekeeper said. And so it went. For every skill Lugh claimed, the gatekeeper said they already had someone with that skill. Donald paused, letting the tension build. Then he smiled. "Finally," Lugh said, "but do you have anyone who is master of all these skills together? Do you have one person who can do all things well?" The gatekeeper had to admit they did not. And so Lugh was admitted to the hall, and he was given the name Samil Danak, which means skilled in all arts. The listeners murmured in appreciation. This was a teaching story, reminding them that versatility and knowledge were as valuable as specialization. When King Nuada met Lugh, He saw immediately that this was no ordinary man. There was something divine about him, a light that shone from within. And indeed Lu was the son of a god and a mortal woman, carrying the blood of both races in his veins. Nuada stepped down from his throne and offered it to Lug, saying, "You shall lead us in this war. You have all the skills we need. You are our hope." And Lug accepted, though he was humble about it, saying he would do his best to serve the people. Donald's playing became faster, more urgent, as he described the preparations for battle. How Lug trained the warriors, how he planned the strategy, how he used his many skills to prepare the Tuatha De Danann for the final confrontation. And when the day of battle came, Lug led the charge. He fought with sword and spear, with his sling and stones. He sang songs that gave courage to his warriors and fear to his enemies. He used his knowledge of smithwork to repair weapons in the midst of battle. He employed his understanding of carpentry to build defenses. Every skill he possessed he used. The battle raged all day and into the night. Many fell on both sides, but Lug's leadership made the difference. Finally, he faced Balor of the Evil Eye. The king of the Fomorians. Balor had one enormous eye that, when opened, could destroy anything it looked upon. It took 4 men just to lift the eyelid. The hall was utterly silent now, everyone leaning forward to hear. As Balor's servants began to lift the deadly eyelid, Lug took a stone from the ground, placed it in his sling, and whirled it around his head. He let fly with perfect aim. The stone struck Balor's eye just as it opened, driving through the eye and out the back of his head. The evil eye's power turned inward, and Balor fell dead. A cheer went up in the hall. Though everyone knew the story, the triumph never got old. With their king dead, the Fomorians fled, Donal concluded. Some retreated to their halls beneath the sea. Others scattered to the wild places of the world. The Tuatha De Danann were victorious, and the land knew peace once more. And Lug's name was praised in every hall, in every song. The Shining One, skilled in all arts, who saved his people through wit and courage and determination. As the applause and cheers faded, Brigid leaned close to Ailba. "Do you know why we tell that story so often?" she asked. Ailba thought for a moment. "Because it teaches that knowledge and skill are better weapons than brute strength alone." "That is part of it," Brigid agreed. "But there is more. Lug represents the ideal druid, in a way. Master of many skills, combining knowledge with action, serving the people rather than himself. He reminds us what we should aspire to be." The evening continued with more stories. An older woman told a tale of the Dagda and his magical harp, which Ailba had heard from Donald the day before. A warrior recounted a humorous story about 2 Chulin and his misadventures while training with the warrior woman Skathak. Children begged for the story of the salmon of knowledge, and Donald obliged, making the fish speak in such a funny voice that everyone laughed. But eventually, Brigid called for silence. "I have a story to share," she said, her voice taking on a serious tone. "A story appropriate for this time of year. When Samhain approaches and the veil grows thin, she settled herself more comfortably and began. There was once a young woman named Etain, who was the most beautiful woman in all of Ireland. She was loved by many, but she gave her heart to Medea, a prince of the Tuatha De Danann, one of the fairy folk. Ailbe recognized this as one of the older stories, one that dealt with the boundaries between the mortal world and the other world. They were happy together for a time, Brigid continued, but Medea had a jealous wife named Fuamnach, who was skilled in magic. In her rage, Fuamnach transformed Etain into a butterfly and sent a wind to blow her far away from her love. For 7 long years, Etain wandered as a butterfly, buffeted by winds, seeking shelter where she could. Finally, exhausted, she fell into a cup of wine that a mortal queen was drinking. The queen swallowed her, and Etain was reborn as a mortal child with no memory of her previous life. She grew up beautiful once more, and in time she married the High King of Ireland. She lived as a mortal woman, not knowing that she had once been anything else. But Medea had never stopped searching for her. For 1,000 years he searched until at last he found her. Brigid's voice grew softer, more intimate. Medea came to the High King's court and challenged him to a game of chess. They played 3 times, and 3 times Medea won. And for his prize he asked for 1 kiss from Etain. The king could not refuse, for he had given his word. But he was wary, so he surrounded his hall with warriors and locked all the doors. Still, Medea walked through the walls as if they were mist. He took Etain in his arms and kissed her. And in that moment, her memory returned. She remembered everything. Her life among the Tuatha De Danann, her love for Medea, her transformation and her long wandering. Medea held her close, and together they rose through the roof of the hall and flew away as 2 white swans, their wings beating in unison. They returned to the Otherworld to live forever in the land of youth, where there is no sickness and no death, only beauty and joy eternal. Silence filled the hall when Brigid finished. It was a love story, yes, but also a reminder of how close the 2 worlds were, how easily one might cross from one to the other, how the people of the Otherworld were not so different from mortals, capable of love and jealousy and determination. That is why, Brigid said, we must respect the fair folk. They walk among us more often than we know. At Samhain especially, when the boundaries blur, we must be cautious and courteous. Leave offerings for them. Speak to them with respect. And if they offer you a gift or a bargain, think carefully before accepting, for their gifts always come with a price. The feast continued into the night, with more stories and songs, laughter and good fellowship. Elby felt warm and content, surrounded by his people, hearing the old tales that connected them to their ancestors and their gods. But as the fire burned low and people began drifting away to their homes and sleeping places, Ailbe felt a pull. He needed to return to the grove, to Cathbad, to continue his preparations. Samhain was only 5 days away now, and there was still so much to learn. He thanked Brigid for the day's teaching and said his farewells to Brennus and the others. Then he slipped out into the night, walking back through the darkness toward the sacred grove. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the black sky like silver seeds. An owl called from somewhere in the forest, and far away a fox barked. The world was alive with its own stories, Ailbe thought. Stories written in the movements of animals, in the turning of the seasons, in the light of stars that had been shining since before humans walked the earth. When he reached the grove, he found Cathbad awake by the fire, carving something from a piece of wood. The old druid looked up and smiled. "You had a good day with Brigid?" he asked. "Ah, very good," Ailbe confirmed, settling beside his master. "I learned much about healing, and I heard many stories tonight." "Stories," Cathbad said thoughtfully. "They are our most precious treasure, Ailbe, more valuable than gold or silver. Through stories, we remember who we are. We pass on our wisdom. We connect the past with the present and the future. Never forget the power of a well-told tale." He held up what he had been carving. It was a figure, crude but recognizable, a stag with branching antlers. "For you," Cathbad said, handing it to Ailbe, "to remind you of your vision, to help you focus when you journey at Samhain." Ailbe accepted the gift with both hands, moved by the gesture. "Thank you, master." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new preparations, but tonight Ailbe was content to simply sit beside his teacher, holding the wooden stag and feeling the ancient trees standing guard around them in the darkness. On the morning of Samhain Eve, Ailbe woke to find the world transformed by fog. Thick white mist blanketed everything, so dense that he could barely see the trees just paces away. It muffled all sound, creating an eerie silence that made the grove feel like a place out of time, suspended between worlds. "Ah, it is fitting," Cathbad said, when Ailbe found him at the teaching circle. "The fog mirrors the thinning veil. Today, the boundary between our world and the other is already growing permeable. Tonight it will vanish entirely." The old druid looked different somehow. His eyes were distant, seeing things Ailbe could not yet perceive. He moved slowly, as if wading through water, conserving his energy for the night ahead. "Come," Cathbad said. "There is one final teaching before tonight's work begins. We must speak of what you will encounter and how to stay safe." They sat together beneath the great oak, and Cathbad pulled his cloak tighter against the chill. The fog swirled around them, occasionally parting to reveal a glimpse of sky before closing in again. "At Samhain," Cathbad began, "the dead walk among the living. Your ancestors, those who loved you in life, may come to visit. They mean no harm. Indeed, they come seeking connection, remembering what it was to live. You may speak with them if you wish, though they cannot stay long. But there are others," he continued, his voice growing grave. "Not all who walk on Samhain night are friendly. Some are confused, lost souls who do not know they are dead. Some are angry, resenting those who still live, and some are simply mischievous, the seedy who delight in playing tricks on mortals." "How do I protect myself?" Ailbe asked. "By staying grounded in your purpose," Cathbad replied. "Remember why you are here. You are a druid, a walker between worlds, but you belong to the middle world. This is your home, your anchor. No matter how far you travel in spirit, you can always return here. He gestured to the trees around them. The grove itself is a protection. The oaks have stood for centuries, and they know us. They will not allow anything truly harmful to enter, but you must also protect yourself. Carry iron, which the fair folk dislike. Wear your sacred herbs, and most importantly, do not eat or drink anything offered to you in the Otherworld, no matter how tempting it seems. Why? Ilba asked. Because to eat the food of the Otherworld is to become part of it, Cathbad said. You would be trapped there, unable to return to your body, to your life. You would become one of them, neither living nor dead, caught forever between. A chill ran down Ailba's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. There are bargains that may be offered, Cathbad continued. The Otherworld folk are great traders, always seeking to exchange one thing for another. They may offer you gifts, knowledge, power, but their bargains always have hidden costs. What seems like a fair trade may bind you in ways you do not understand until it is too late. So I should refuse all offers? Alba asked. Not all, Cathbad said thoughtfully. Some exchanges are honest and beneficial, but you must listen carefully to the exact words spoken. The Otherworld folk cannot lie outright, but they are masters of misdirection and partial truths. If something sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is. They spent the rest of the morning going over what Ilba might encounter. Brigid joined them, and together the two druids shared their knowledge, how to recognize which spirits were friendly and which were not, what signs to look for that indicated danger. Protective charms and invocations he could use if he felt threatened. Remember the stag, Cathbad said, as the lesson drew to a close. He appeared to you as a guide. Trust in him. He will not lead you astray. As afternoon approached, people began arriving from the surrounding area. Families from the hill fort, farmers from outlying steadings, even a few travelers who happened to be passing through. Everyone knew that Samhain was best spent in community, with the protection of numbers and the comfort of shared ritual. The women had been cooking all day, preparing a feast that would feed everyone twice over. There were great pots of stew bubbling over cooking fires, roasted meats on spits, the fat dripping and sizzling in the flames, fresh bread and butter, wheels of cheese, baskets of apples and hazelnuts. It was a celebration of the harvest's abundance, a last feast before the lean months of winter. But it was also a meal shared with the dead. In each home, in the great hall, extra places were set. Empty chairs at tables, bowls filled with food that no living hand would touch. These were for the ancestors, for the beloved dead who would walk among them this night. As the sun began its descent, Cathbad gathered everyone together on the hilltop where the great fire waited. The wood was stacked in a careful pattern, with kindling at its heart and larger logs arranged around it. Ailba stood beside his master, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. People of the land, Cathbad's voice rang out, strong despite his age. Tonight we celebrate Samhain, the end of one year and the beginning of the next. Tonight the old dies so the new may be born. Tonight the veil between worlds grows thin, and we may speak with those who have gone before us. He gestured to the houses visible below. Extinguish your fires, all of them. Let the hearths go dark. Tonight we return to the void, to the darkness from which all life emerges, and then we will kindle new fire, sacred fire, and carry its blessing to every home." There was a solemn movement as people hurried to obey. Aelbe watched as smoke stopped rising from the chimneys, as the warm glow of firelight vanished from windows. In minutes, the settlement was dark, and the only light came from the dying sun on the horizon. "Now," Cathbad said quietly to Aelbe, "now we begin." He produced a fire drill, 2 pieces of wood carefully shaped for this purpose. Oak and ash rubbed together to create friction to coax spark from wood. This was the old way of making fire, the way their ancestors had done it before metal and flint. Cathbad began to work the drill, rotating it rapidly between his palms. The wood smoked. The smell of burning filled the air. Aelbe watched, transfixed, as his master's hands moved in a blur, faster than seemed possible for someone his age. And then a spark, tiny, red, precious. Cathbad caught it on a piece of charcloth, blew on it gently, feeding it with his breath. The spark grew into a small flame. He transferred it to a nest of dried grass and shavings, nurturing it, whispering prayers to it. "Come, flame," he murmured. "Come, sacred fire, light that drives back darkness, warmth that sustains life, power that transforms. Come forth." The flame grew larger, hungrier. Cathbad placed it at the heart of the wood stack, feeding it with small twigs. The fire took hold, spreading through the kindling, reaching up toward the larger logs. In minutes, flames were roaring skyward, a beacon visible for miles around. The people cheered, their voices rising into the darkening sky. The sacred fire was lit. The new year was born. Cathbad raised his arms and silence fell. As this fire burns, so does the year turn. What was is no more. What will be has not yet taken form. We stand in the space between, in the eternal now, where all possibilities exist. He took a burning brand from the fire and used it to light torches that waited nearby. These were distributed to heads of households who would carry the sacred flame back to relight their own hearths. One fire becoming many, spreading the blessing throughout the community. "Tonight," Cathbad continued, "honor your dead. Set places for them at your tables. Tell stories of them. Remember them with love, for they remember you. They watch over you still, and tonight they walk beside you once more. As twilight deepened into night, the feast began. Long tables had been set up near the fire, groaning under the weight of food. But Aelbe noticed that many people ate sparingly, as if saving room for something else, and indeed, Cathbad had warned him that it was traditional to leave part of your stomach empty on Samhain night to stay light and ready for whatever might come. Aelbe found himself seated between Brigid and Donal. The bard was unusually quiet, his eyes distant. "Do you feel it?" Donal asked softly. "The change in the air?" Aelbe did feel it. The fog had lifted somewhat, but the darkness seemed deeper than usual, thicker, and there was a quality to the silence between sounds, a sense of presence, of waiting. "They are gathering," Brigid said. The dead, the Sidhe, all those who dwell beyond the veil. They know this night is theirs as much as ours. As if in confirmation a breeze stirred through the hilltop, though Alba had not felt wind all day. It carried with it strange scents, sometimes flowers, sweet and cloying, sometimes earth and decay, sometimes something entirely unfamiliar, like nothing that existed in the mortal world. People began to notice. Conversations grew quieter. Children pressed closer to their parents. Everyone's attention turned inward, listening, watching, waiting. And then someone gasped and pointed. There, at the edge of the firelight, figures were appearing. They seemed to form from the darkness itself, translucent and shimmering. Alba could see through them to the trees beyond, and yet they were undeniably there, real and unreal at once. An old man, his face kind and weathered. A young woman barely more than a girl. A child, laughing silently. More and more appeared until the edges of the gathering were lined with these ghostly visitors. Their ancestors, Cathbad said, his voice full of wonder despite having witnessed this many times before. They have come. A woman in the crowd stood suddenly, tears streaming down her face. "Mother," she called. "Mother, is it you?" One of the spirits turned toward her voice. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes, the same tilt of the head. The ghost smiled and raised one hand in greeting, though she did not speak. All around the hilltop, similar recognitions were happening. People called out names, moved toward the spirits of their beloved dead. Some wept, some laughed. All were overcome with emotion at seeing those they had lost. Cathbad moved through the crowd, speaking quietly to people, reminding them not to try to touch the spirits, for physical contact would break the vision and send them back to the other world. "Speak with them," he counseled. "Tell them you remember. Tell them you love them still, but do not try to hold them. They are not meant to stay." Ailbe stood rooted to his spot, scanning the spirits. Was his father there? His grandfather who had died when Ailbe was small? He searched each face, hoping and fearing in equal measure. And then he saw him, standing slightly apart from the others, watching Ailbe with eyes full of pride and love. His grandfather, looking just as Ailbe remembered him from childhood, though the memory should have faded by now. "Grandfather," Ailbe breathed. The spirit moved closer, though his feet did not quite touch the ground. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Ailbe, my boy, look at you. A druid now, or nearly. I knew you had it in you. I told your father before I passed. That boy sees what others miss," I said. "He walks with one foot in each world. And I was right. I miss you," Ailbe said, and was surprised to find tears on his cheeks. "I know," his grandfather replied gently, "and I have missed watching you grow. But I am never far, boy. I watch over you still. We all do, all your ancestors, all the way back to the first who walked this land. You carry us with you in your blood, in your bones, in the knowledge you are learning. You honor us by walking this path." "I am afraid," Ailbe admitted. "Tonight, Cathbad says I will journey to the Otherworld. What if I fail? What if I am not strong enough?" His grandfather's smile was warm. "You are strong enough, more than you know. Trust in yourself, Ailbe. Trust in your training. And trust in us. We will be with you, even there. You are never alone." The spirit began to fade, growing more transparent. "It is nearly time," he said. "Cathbad will call you soon. Go with courage, boy. Make us proud." "I will try," Elba whispered. "Goodbye, grandfather." "Not goodbye," the spirit said as he vanished entirely. "Never goodbye. Only until we meet again." Ailbe stood in the firelight, wiping his eyes, feeling both bereft and somehow comforted. All around him, people were having their own farewells, their own moments of connection with those they had lost. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once, as the last of the spirits faded with the deepening of night. Cathbad made his way to Ailbe's side. The old druid's face was grave, his eyes shining with power. "Are you ready?" he asked. Ailbe touched the wooden stag figure in his pocket, feeling its rough shape beneath his fingers. He thought of his grandfather's words, of all the lessons he had learned over 3 years, of the stag guide who had promised to lead him true. "I am ready," he said. Cathbad nodded. "Then come. It is time for you to walk between the worlds." They reached the teaching circle, but it looked different now. The stones around the edge glowed with a faint silvery light, and the great oak at the center seemed larger somehow, its branches reaching impossibly high into the star-filled sky. The boundary between what was real and what was magic had blurred until Ailbe could not tell where one ended and the other began. Brigid was already there, along with 3 other druids that Ailbe had not met before. They formed a circle around the base of the great oak, sitting with their legs crossed, their hands resting on their knees. Cathbad gestured for Ailbe to take his place at the circle's center, directly against the oak's massive trunk. "Tonight," Cathbad said, his voice taking on the formal cadence of ritual, "we send forth our brother Ailbe on his first journey between the worlds. We ask the protection of the gods, the blessing of the ancestors, and the guidance of the spirits. May he travel safely. May he see truly. May he return to us with the wisdom gained." The other druids echoed his words, their voices blending together in harmony. Then they began to chant, a wordless melody that rose and fell like waves on a shore. The sound filled Ailbe's head, resonating in his bones, making his skin tingle with building energy. Cathbad knelt before Ailbe and held out a small clay cup. Even in the darkness, Ailbe could see the liquid within, dark and thick. "This is the sacred drink," Cathbad said, "made from the mushrooms I showed you, mixed with honey and herbs. It will help your spirit slip free of your body. It will open the doors of perception. But Ailbe, hear me. You must remain anchored. No matter what you see, no matter what calls to you, remember this tree, remember this grove, remember your name. Do you understand?" "I understand," Ailbe said, though his mouth was dry and his heart pounded like a drum. "Then drink and begin your journey." Ailbe took the cup with both hands. He brought it to his lips and drank. The liquid was bitter, earthy, with a strange sweetness underneath. He forced himself to swallow it all, feeling it slide down his throat and settle heavy in his stomach. For a moment, nothing happened. the Druids continued their chanting. The stars wheeled overhead. Aelba sat against the oak, waiting, wondering if the drink would work for him. And then the world began to change. It started subtly. Colors grew more vivid. The silver light of the stones brightened until it was almost painful to look at. The Druid's chanting seemed to come from inside his own head now, as if they were speaking directly to his thoughts. His body felt strange, heavy, and light at the same time. Aelby looked down at his hands and gasped. He could see through them, not completely, but enough to see the ground beneath. He was becoming translucent, insubstantial. His spirit was separating from his flesh. "Do not fear," Cathbad's voice came from very far away. "Let it happen, let go." Aelbe closed his eyes and surrendered to the sensation. There was a moment of vertigo, of falling and flying simultaneously, and then, quite suddenly, he was standing beside his body. He could see himself sitting against the oak, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and deep. His physical form looked so small, so fragile. How did his spirit fit inside that limited shell? It seemed impossible now. The Druids were still chanting, but Aelby could see the sound now, as well as hear it. Waves of golden light flowed from their mouths, swirling around him, forming a protective barrier. This was their gift to him, a shield woven of prayer and power. Aelby turned away from his body and looked outward. The grove had transformed entirely. The trees glowed with an inner light, and he could see the life force flowing through them like luminous sap. Spirits moved between the trunks, beings of bark and leaf who regarded him with ancient eyes. The boundary stones of the circle pulsed with energy, and connecting them were lines of light, forming a perfect ring of protection. But beyond the circle, beyond the grove, lay something else. A shimmering wall, like heat haze made solid, that marked the edge of the middle world, and in that wall, directly in front of Aelby, was an opening, a doorway, an invitation. As Aelba hesitated, unsure whether to step forward, a figure emerged from the opening. It was the stag, the same one that had appeared to him in his first vision. But now, Aelba could see him truly, in all his glory. His coat was pure light. His antlers were made of living wood that sprouted leaves and buds even as Aelba watched. His eyes held the wisdom of ages. "Come," the stag said, and his voice was like wind through leaves, like water over stone. "I will guide you, but we must go now. The way is open, but it will not remain so for long." Aelbe stepped forward, leaving the protection of the circle. As he crossed the boundary marked by the stones, he felt a shift, like stepping through a curtain into a different room. The grove was still there behind him, but it seemed distant now, separated by more than physical space. The stag turned and walked toward the shimmering wall. As he approached, the opening grew larger, until it was easily tall enough and wide enough for Aelba to pass through. Beyond it, Aelba could see strange vistas, hills that were too green, too perfect, a sky that held more colors than should exist. "Follow closely," the stag instructed. "Do not stray from the path I show you." The other world is vast, and it is easy to become lost. Elby nodded and followed the stag through the doorway. The transition was like plunging into water. There was a moment of disorientation, of pressure and change. And then Ailba stood in the other world, and nothing in his 3 years of training could have prepared him for what he saw. The land was beautiful beyond words. Rolling hills covered in grass so green it hurt to look at. Trees laden with fruit and flowers simultaneously. A sky that shifted through colors purple to gold to silver to blue, all flowing together like oil on water. And the light came from everywhere and nowhere, illuminating everything without casting shadows. Welcome, the stag said, to the land of youth, the other world, the place humans call Tir na Nog. Here, time moves differently. What seems like moments may be hours in your world. What feels like hours may be mere heartbeats. You must not lose track of the time, or you may find that centuries have passed when you return. Ailby's wonder mingled with fear. How do I keep track? By maintaining your connection to your body, the stag replied. Feel it now, that thread that connects your spirit to your flesh. It is silver, thin but strong. As long as you can feel that thread, you remain anchored. If you lose it, you will be trapped here. Ailby concentrated, and yes, he could feel it. A subtle tug, like a rope tied around his chest, stretching back toward the grove and his body sitting against the oak. It was his lifeline, his way home. They walked through the landscape, and Ailba saw wonders at every turn. Waterfalls that flowed upward into the sky, gardens where every flower sang its own song, stones that moved and rearranged themselves into patterns of meaning, and everywhere beings. Some looked almost human, tall and fair, with eyes too bright and movements too graceful. These were the Sida, the fair folk, the people of the mounds. They watched Ailba with curiosity and amusement as he passed, whispering to each other in voices like bells. Others were stranger, beings made of light and smoke, creatures with the bodies of deer and the faces of wise old men, small sprites that danced in the air like living sparks, an entire court of entities that defied description, forms that shifted and changed even as Albert looked at them. Do not speak to them unless they speak to you first, the stag warned, and if they do speak, be careful with your words. Everything here has power. Every promise is binding. Every word is a contract. They climbed a hill, and from its summit, Ailbe could see even more of this impossible realm. In the distance, a great fortress rose from the land, its towers reaching toward the shifting sky. Closer, a lake of pure starlight rippled in a breeze that carried music. And everywhere, the sense of timelessness, of eternity, of a place where death had no dominion. Why have you brought me here? Ailba asked the stag. What am I meant to see, to learn? Look there, the stag said, gesturing with his antlered head toward a particular spot on the landscape. Ailby looked and saw a group of figures approaching. As they drew nearer, he realized they were humans, or rather, they had been human once. Now, they existed in the strange in-between state, neither fully alive nor truly dead. Their clothing was old-fashioned from earlier times, and they walked with the stiffness of those who had forgotten what it was to live. These are the ones who stayed too long, the stag explained, who ate the food of the Otherworld or accepted gifts they should not have. They are trapped here now, belonging to neither world. They serve the Seedher, and they have forgotten what it was to be mortal. One of the figures looked up and met Ailba's eyes. For a moment, recognition flared there, a memory of what it had been to live. The figure opened its mouth as if to speak, to warn, but then the light faded from its eyes and it shuffled on, following the others wherever they were going. Ailba felt sick. "That could have been me," he whispered. "Yes," the stag agreed. "This is why your people tell the old stories. Why druids warn those who would walk between worlds. Beauty and wonder exist here, but also danger. The Otherworld is not evil, but it is other. It operates by different rules, and those rules do not favor human life." They descended the hill and came to a clearing where 3 paths diverged. At the crossroads stood a figure, hooded and cloaked, leaning on a staff. As they approached, the figure looked up, and Ailbe saw it was a woman, ancient beyond measure. Her face was lined with the weight of eons, but her eyes were young and sharp. "Ailbe," she said, and her voice echoed with power. "Druid apprentice, walker between worlds, I have been waiting for you." "Who are you?" Ailba asked, though he thought he might know. "I am the Cailleach," she replied, "the old woman of winter, the hag who brings the cold and the dark. I am one of the ancient ones here before the gods you know, before even the Tuatha De Danann, and I have a message for you." She stepped closer, and despite the stag's presence, Ailba felt fear curl in his belly. This was a power far beyond anything he had encountered. "The world is changing," the Cailleach said. "Even now, in your middle world, forces gather that will transform everything. A new god is coming, one who speaks of love and sacrifice. His followers carry crosses of iron, and they will drive out the old ways. They will cut down the sacred groves. They will silence the druids." Ailbe wanted to protest, to deny, but something in her eyes told him it was true. "But knowledge does not die so easily," she continued. "Stories persist. Wisdom finds new vessels. The druids may fade, but what they know, what they preserve, will survive in other forms. In songs, in tales told around winter fires, in the hearts of those who still feel the pull of the old ways." She reached out and touched Ailba's forehead with one gnarled finger. Power flowed through the touch, visions cascading through his mind. He saw centuries unfolding, churches rising where groves once stood, druids hiding their knowledge, passing it on in secret. The old festivals reinterpreted, disguised, but surviving. And always, always the land itself remembering, holding the wisdom in its bones. "Your task," the Cailleach said, "is not to stop the change. No one can do that. Your task is to preserve what you can, to teach what you know, to ensure that when the time comes, and it will come, when people hunger again for connection to the earth and the old powers, they will find guidance waiting. Even if they do not know they are following druid wisdom, they will be following it still." She stepped back, releasing him. Ailba staggered, overwhelmed by what he had seen. "Now go," the Cailleach said. "Return to your body. Your teacher waits. But remember what you have seen here. Remember and act accordingly. she vanished, simply ceasing to exist between one moment and the next. The stag touched Elba's arm gently. "Come," he said. "It is time to return. You have been here long enough. Any longer and the thread might fray." They walked back the way they had come, though the landscape seemed different now, as if it had rearranged itself in their absence. Elba's mind churned with everything he had witnessed: the trapped humans, the Kylix prophecy, the visions of change and transformation. Finally, they reached the shimmering wall with its doorway back to the middle world. Through it, Ilbe could see the grove, the circle of druids still chanting, his body still sitting against the oak. "Thank you," Ilbe said to the stag, "for guiding me, for keeping me safe." "It is my purpose," the stag replied. "I am one of the guardians between worlds, and you are one of those I am meant to guide. We will meet again, Ilbe. When you need me, call, and I will come." The stag touched his nose to Ilbe's chest, just above his heart. Warmth spread through Ilbe's spirit form, a blessing, a gift of protection. "Now go," the stag said. "Return to your life. And remember, the Otherworld is always here. The door is never truly closed. You need only know how to find it." Ailbe stepped through the doorway, feeling the pressure and change once more. The Otherworld fell away behind him, and he was back in the grove, standing beside his body. The silver thread that connected them pulsed with light, drawing him down, pulling him back. He did not resist. He let himself fall until he crashed back into flesh with a gasp that filled his lungs with cold night air. His eyes flew open. He was back in his body, back in the middle world. The druids had stopped chanting and were watching him with concern. Cathbad knelt before him, one hand on his shoulder. "Welcome back," the old druid said softly. "You were gone for 3 hours. What did you see?" Ailbe's mouth was dry. His body felt strange, heavy and cumbersome after the freedom of spirit. But he was home, he was safe, and he had so much to tell. "Everything," he whispered. "I saw everything." Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, and the great oak stood guardian over mysteries older than words. Samhain night was not yet over, but Ailbe's journey had come full circle. He had walked between the worlds and returned. He was truly a druid now. Brigid brought him warm broth to drink and wrapped an extra cloak around his shoulders. He was shaking, though whether from cold or the aftermath of his journey, he could not say. His body felt simultaneously exhausted and electrified, as if every nerve ending had been awakened. "Slowly," Cathbad cautioned when Ailbe tried to stand. "Your spirit has traveled far, but your body remained here. Give yourself time to reconcile the two." Ailbe nodded and settled back against the oak. The tree felt solid and real behind him, grounding him in the physical world. He sipped the broth gratefully, feeling warmth spread through his chest and belly. The other druids departed as the sun climbed higher, returning to their own groves and communities. But Brigid remained, and together she and Cathbad sat with Ailbe as the morning light painted the grove in shades of gold and amber. "Tell us," Cathbad said gently. "Tell us what you saw." And so Ailbe spoke. He described the Otherworld in all its beauty and strangeness. The hills too green, the sky of many colors, the beings that dwelled there. He told them of the stag's guidance, of the trapped humans who had stayed too long, of the crossroads where the Kailish had appeared. When he reached the part about her prophecy, about the coming changes and the new god with his cross of iron, both Cathbad and Braghid grew very still. They exchanged a long look that spoke of knowledge shared, of confirmations of things suspected but not yet spoken aloud. "So it is true, then," Brigid said quietly. "The old ways are fading." "Not fading," Cathbad corrected. "Transforming. As the Kailich told Ailbe, knowledge does not die. It changes form, adapts, survives. This is the way of all things. Even we druids who honor the cycles of nature must accept that we too are part of those cycles." He looked at Ailbe with eyes that held both sadness and something like pride. "This is why your training has been so important. Why I have pushed you to learn not just the rituals and prayers, but to understand the principles beneath them. The specific forms may change, but the truth remains. The earth is sacred. All life is connected. Balance must be maintained. These truths will survive even when the word druid is forgotten. But they will not be forgotten entirely," Brigid added. "There will always be those who remember, who keep the old stories alive. We may go underground, practice in secret, but we will not vanish." Ailbe absorbed their words, feeling the weight of what he had witnessed settling into understanding. The Kailak had not shown him these visions to frighten him, but to prepare him, to help him see his role in the larger pattern. "What should I do?" he asked. "How do I prepare for this change?" "By doing what you are already doing," Cathbad said. "Learn all you can. Practice your arts. Serve your people. And most importantly, teach. Find students who have the gift, the sensitivity to the unseen world, and pass on what you know. Create a chain of knowledge that stretches into the future." As the morning progressed, Ailbe found his strength returning. His body no longer felt like a stranger to him, and the shaking had subsided. He stood testing his legs and found they would hold him. "Come," Cathbad said, "let us walk. Movement will help you ground fully back into your flesh." They walked through the grove, and Ailbe found himself seeing it with new eyes after his journey. The trees were still trees, solid and rooted in the earth. But now he could sense the spirits that dwelled within them, the consciousness that animated their growth. The boundary between physical and spiritual had become permeable for him, and he suspected it would never fully solidify again. They emerged from the grove onto higher ground, and from there they could see the hill fort in the distance. Smoke rose from chimneys once more, the sacred fire having been carried to each household to rekindle their hearths. Life had returned to normal, or at least to what passed for normal in the wake of Samhain. How do you feel?" Cathbad asked. "Truly?" Ailbe considered the question carefully. "Different," he said at last. "Changed. I left part of myself in the Otherworld, I think, and I brought part of it back with me. I am not quite the same person who began this night." "Good," Cathbad said with satisfaction. "That is exactly how you should feel. The journey between worlds transforms those who undertake it. You have been initiated, Ailbe. Not through formal ceremony, though that will come, but through direct experience of the mysteries. You have walked in the Otherworld and returned. You have spoken with the ancient powers. You are a druid now, in truth as well as training. They returned to the grove to find several people waiting. Word had spread that Ailba had completed his first Otherworld journey, and those with questions or needs had come seeking his counsel. It was a test of sorts, Ailba realized. His first opportunity to serve as a druid in his own right, not merely as Cathbad's apprentice. The first person to approach was a young woman named Fiona, her face pale with worry. "Please," she said, "my husband left 3 days ago to hunt in the western forest. He should have returned by now. I fear something has happened to him." Ailba glanced at Cathbad, who made a subtle gesture. "Go ahead. This is yours." Taking a deep breath, Ailba centered himself. He called upon the skills he had learned, the connection to the unseen world that had been strengthened by his journey. He closed his eyes and reached out with his awareness searching. And there, like a thread of light in the darkness, he found it. A connection to the missing man, faint but present. Following that thread, Ailba saw a vision. A man with a twisted ankle sheltering in a small cave, unable to walk back. Alive, but in need of help. "He is alive," Ailba said, opening his eyes. "In a cave about 3 hours' walk west of here near the old standing stones. His ankle is injured. Send men to bring him back and they will find him." Fiona's face flooded with relief. Thank you. I will send my brothers immediately." The next person was an old farmer with a sick cow. Then a mother worried about her daughter's upcoming marriage. Then a merchant seeking guidance on when to make a trading journey. For each, LB found he had an answer. Sometimes it came from his training, the herbs and remedies he had learned. Sometimes it came from intuition, a knowing that arose without conscious thought. And sometimes it came from that place beyond, from the connection he had forged with the other world. By the time the last person departed, the sun was past its peak and beginning its descent toward evening. Ailby was tired, but satisfied. This was the work, he realized. Not just the dramatic rituals and otherworld journeys, but this daily service. Answering questions, solving problems, easing worries. Being a bridge between the physical and spiritual, yes, but also between people and the wisdom they needed to navigate their lives. Cathbad had watched it all in silence. Now he approached Ailba with a smile. "You did well," he said simply. "Very well. You answered from knowledge when knowledge was needed, and from intuition when that was called for. You were neither too confident nor too hesitant. You served the people without serving your own ego. This is the balance we strive for." "Thank you, Master," Ailby said, feeling a warm glow of accomplishment. "There is one more teaching I must give you," Cathbad said, his expression growing serious. "A teaching about the true nature of our work. Come, sit with me." They settled by the teaching oak, and Cathbad was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "You have learned much about the spiritual world," he began. "About the gods and spirits, about ritual and magic. But I must tell you now that all of this, all of it, is in service of one thing. Balance." "Balance," Elby repeated, remembering how often this word had come up in his training. Everything in nature exists in balance, Cathbad continued. Day and night, summer and winter, birth and death. When that balance is disturbed, suffering follows. Crops fail, sickness spreads, wars begin. Our role as druids is to help maintain that balance or to restore it when it has been lost. He gestured broadly. We do this in many ways. We settle disputes, preventing conflicts from escalating into bloodshed. We heal the sick, restoring balance to the body. We perform rituals at the turning of the seasons, helping the natural cycle continue smoothly. We advise leaders, helping them make decisions that serve the whole, rather than just themselves. Every action we take, every word we speak should be in service of maintaining or restoring balance. But Master, Elba said, what about the changes the Cailleach spoke of? The coming of the new god and the fading of the old ways. How do we maintain balance in the face of such upheaval? Cathbad smiled sadly. By accepting that change itself is part of the balance. Nothing lasts forever, Ailbe. Not kingdoms, not religions, not even the land itself. Everything changes, everything transforms. To cling to what was is to create imbalance. The art is in guiding the change, in helping it happen with as little suffering as possible. So we do not fight against the new god? Elba asked, trying to understand. We do not fight, Cathbad confirmed. We adapt. We preserve what can be preserved. We teach those who will listen, and we trust that the essential truths will survive, even if they wear different clothing. The new god speaks of love and sacrifice. These are not new ideas. We honor love in our devotion to the land. We understand sacrifice in our offerings, in our service. The words may change, but the heart remains the same. Ailbe sat with this teaching, feeling it settle into place alongside everything else he had learned. This was wisdom born of long experience, of watching empires rise and fall, of seeing generations come and go. It was the wisdom of the oak, which bends in the storm rather than breaking. There is something I must tell you, Cathbad said, and his voice was gentle but firm. Something I have kept from you until now, until you were ready to understand. Ailbe looked up, sensing the importance of what was about to be said. I am old, Ailbe, older than you know. I have lived 70 winters, and that is a long life for anyone, even a druid. My time in this world is drawing to a close. I feel it in my bones, in the way my spirit grows restless, eager to move on to what comes next. Master, no, Ailbe protested, feeling sudden panic. Cathbad held up a hand. Peace, young oak. This is not a tragedy. It is simply the natural order. I have lived a full life. I have taught many students, though you are the most talented I have known. I have served my people well. I am ready for the next journey. But I need you, Ailbe said, and heard the child in his voice. I am not ready to be on my own. You are more ready than you know, Cathbad said warmly. Last night proved that. You walked between worlds and returned safely. Today, you served your people with wisdom and compassion. You are a druid, Ailbe, a true druid, and when I am gone, you will continue the work. You will teach the next generation. The chain will not be broken. Tears pricked at Ailbe's eyes. When? He managed to ask. Soon, Cathbad said. Perhaps this winter. Perhaps next spring. The gods will decide. But I wanted you to know so that you could prepare, not just practically, though there are rituals and knowledge I must still pass on to you, but emotionally, so that when the time comes you can let me go with grace, as I will leave with peace. They sat together in silence as the afternoon faded towards evening. Elba felt the weight of what was to come settling on his shoulders. The responsibility of being the druid, not the apprentice, of carrying forward the ancient wisdom into an uncertain future. But he also felt something else: confidence, readiness, a sense that while the path ahead might be difficult, he was equipped to walk it. His training had been thorough. His experiences had been transformative, and he carried within him not just knowledge, but wisdom. "Thank you," Alba said at last, "for everything, for taking me as your student, for your patience with my questions and my mistakes, for showing me the path." "It has been my honor," Cathbad replied. "You have been a joy to teach, Ailbe, and you will make me proud in the years to come. Of this I have no doubt." As night fell once more, they shared a simple meal by the fire, and though the future held uncertainty and change, in that moment there was peace. The grove stood eternal around them. The stars wheeled overhead, and the ancient wisdom passed from teacher to student, ensuring that the light would not go out, no matter how dark the times ahead might become. Ailbe threw himself into his work with renewed purpose. If Cathbad's time was indeed growing short, then every moment with his master was precious. Every lesson was one that might not be repeated. He absorbed knowledge like the earth absorbs rain, storing it against future need. They worked together, preparing for winter's needs, gathering herbs and roots before the ground froze too hard to dig, processing them into tinctures and salves that would see the community through the cold months. Ailba learned which plants could still be harvested even in winter, and which must wait for spring. Willow bark can be stripped year-round, Cathbad explained as they worked by the river one bitter morning. But it is best taken when the sap is rising in spring. Still, in times of need it will serve. Remember this, Alba. Nature provides, even in the darkest seasons. You need only know where to look. They also spent time with the people of the Hillfoot, for winter was when sickness struck hardest. The coughing illness that had afflicted the children in autumn returned with greater force. An elderly woman developed a fever that would not break. A young man suffered a hunting accident that left his leg badly broken. For each case, Ailbe worked alongside Cathbad and Braghid, learning not just the physical treatments, but the gentle words of comfort, the prayers of healing, the way to hold space for suffering while working to ease it. He learned that healing was as much about presence as it was about medicine. People need to be seen, Brigid told him one evening as they cleaned their tools after a long day of tending the sick. They need to know that someone cares about their suffering, that they are not alone in their pain. Sometimes that recognition is as healing as any herb. But there was joy in the winter too. The people celebrated the winter solstice with a great feast, marking the longest night and the return of the light. Cathbad led the ceremony, speaking of how even in the deepest darkness the seeds of spring were already beginning to stir beneath the frozen earth. Nothing was ever truly dead, he reminded them. Everything was simply resting, gathering strength for renewal. On the nights when no urgent needs called them elsewhere, Alba and Cathbad sat by the fire in the grove, and the old druid spoke of things he had witnessed in his long life. He told of the great gathering of druids he had attended as a young man, where knowledge from across Britannia and beyond had been shared. He spoke of kings he had counseled, of battles he had helped prevent through wise mediation. He described his own teacher, an ancient woman who had seemed to him then as old as the hills themselves. "She taught me something I will now teach you," Cathbad said, one particularly cold night, the fire casting dancing shadows on his weathered face. She said that a druid's greatest power is not in their magic or their ritual knowledge. It is in their ability to listen. "To listen?" Alba asked, curious. "To truly listen," Cathbad emphasized. "Not just to the words people speak, but to what lies beneath them, to the fear behind the anger, to the pain behind the silence, to listen to the land itself, to what it needs from us, to listen to the gods and spirits, to the wisdom they offer. Most people go through life speaking, always speaking, but it is in the spaces between words, in the silence, that truth reveals itself." He gestured for Alba to be quiet. They sat in silence for a long time, and Alba tried to do as his master suggested, to listen not with his ears, but with his whole being. And slowly he began to hear it. The grove had its own voice. The whisper of wind through bare branches, the crack of ice in the stream, the soft rustling of some small creature in the undergrowth, the patient breathing of the earth itself, resting beneath its blanket of frost. Each sound was a word in a language older than human speech. "I hear it," Alba whispered at last. "Good," Cathbad said. "Remember this skill. In the years to come, when you are uncertain, when you do not know which path to take, stop, be still, listen. The answer will come." As winter deepened, Cathbad began teaching Albi the most sacred knowledge, the long poems that recorded the genealogies of the tribes, going back generation after generation to the legendary ancestors, the complex system of law that governed disputes and crimes, a system so intricate it took years to master fully. The astronomical knowledge that allowed druids to track the movements of sun and moon and stars, to know when each festival should be celebrated. But most precious of all were the stories. Not just the famous tales that everyone knew, but the hidden stories. The ones passed only from druid to druid. Secret histories of the land, of ancient battles between gods, of bargains struck and promises kept. These stories contain the deep wisdom, the truths that could not be spoken plainly, but must be wrapped in symbol and metaphor. These stories are not mere entertainment, Cathbad explained. They are teaching devices. Each one contains layers of meaning. A child hears a simple tale of heroes and adventure. A youth hears lessons about courage and honor. But a druid, a true druid, hears the cosmic truths encoded within, about the nature of reality, about how the worlds interact, about the obligations we owe to the land and to each other. He made Elba repeat the stories back to him again and again, until every word was perfect, every gesture precise. The oral tradition was exact in its transmission, for if even one word changed, the meaning might shift, the wisdom might be lost. One particularly harsh night, with wind howling outside and snow beginning to fall, Cathbad grew reflective. He stared into the fire for a long time before speaking. "I have been thinking about what the Kailik told you," he said at last, "about the changes to come. And I realize that in some ways I am fortunate. I will not see the worst of it. I will die while the old ways are still practiced openly, while druids are still honored. But you, Albe, you will witness the transformation. You will see the sacred groves cut down, the old festivals forbidden or transformed beyond recognition." "Master," Ilby began, but Cathbad held up a hand. "Let me finish. What I want you to understand is this. Do not despair when these things happen. Do not rage against the change, though you will be tempted to. Instead, remember what we have spoken of, about adaptation, about preserving the essential truths even as the forms change. You will need to be clever. You will need to be flexible. You may need to practice in secret, to disguise your knowledge in acceptable forms." He turned to look directly at Eilbe. "But you will also need to recognize the truth when you see it, even coming from unexpected sources. If this new god teaches love and compassion, if his followers speak of caring for the poor and honoring the earth, then these are our teachings too, dressed in new words. Do not reject them simply because they are different. Look for the common ground. Build bridges rather than walls." "I understand," Aelba said, though part of him wondered if he truly did. It was easy to speak of acceptance and adaptation in the warmth of the grove, with his master beside him. It would be harder when standing alone, watching the world he knew crumble away. As if reading his thoughts, Cathbad smiled. "You will find your way, Ailbe. I have faith in you. More than that, I have seen you tested. You have faced the Otherworld and returned. You have spoken with the Kailik herself. These experiences have forged you, made you stronger than you know. When the difficult times come, you will remember what you learned, and you will find the strength to continue." The winter solstice passed, and slowly, day by day, the light began to return. The sun climbed a little higher in the sky each noon. The darkness retreated minute by minute. It was imperceptible at first, but by late January everyone could feel it. The worst of winter was past. Spring was still far off, but it was coming. One morning, Ailbe woke to find Cathbad already up and dressed in his finest robes, the ones he wore for the most important ceremonies. The old druid's eyes were bright, his face serene. "Today," he announced, "we perform your formal initiation. You have already been initiated through your Samhain journey, but the community must witness it officially. You must take your place as a druid in the eyes of all." They walked to the hill fort where Brennus had gathered the people in the great hall. Word had spread, and it seemed everyone wanted to witness this occasion. The hall was packed, people standing shoulder to shoulder, children sitting in the rafters for a better view. Brigid was there, along with the other druids from the region. They formed a circle in the center of the hall, and Cathbad led Elby into that circle. The old druid's voice rang out, strong and clear despite his age. People of the land, I bring before you Aelbe, son of Dermot, who has studied the druid arts for 3 years. He has learned the healing herbs and the sacred stories. He has mastered ritual and developed his inner sight. He has walked between the worlds and returned with wisdom. I declare him ready to take his place among us as a full druid. Cathbad turned to Aelbe. Aelbe, do you swear to serve the people with wisdom and compassion, to maintain the balance in all things, to preserve and pass on the sacred knowledge? I do so swear, Aelbe said clearly, his voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes upon him. Do you swear to honor the gods and spirits, to tend the sacred groves, to speak truth even when it is difficult? I do so swear. Do you swear to teach those who come after you, to ensure that the wisdom is not lost, to be a link in the chain that stretches back to our ancestors and forward to our descendants? I do so swear. Cathbad placed his hands on Aelbe's shoulders. Then, by the authority vested in me by the ancient tradition, by the power of the land and the gods, I name you Druid. May you walk in wisdom all your days. The other druids came forward, each placing a hand briefly on Aelbe's head or shoulder, acknowledging him as one of their own. Brigid was last, and she smiled warmly as she touched his cheek. Welcome, brother, she said softly. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. A feast had been prepared, and now it was brought forth. There was music and dancing, storytelling and laughter. It was a celebration not just of Aelbe's achievement, but of the continuity of tradition, the assurance that the wisdom would be passed on to the next generation. But in the midst of the celebration, Aelbe noticed Cathbad slipping away. The old druid moved slowly toward the door, and something in his manner made Aelbe follow. He found his master outside, looking up at the winter sky where stars were beginning to appear. Are you all right? Aelbe asked. I am well, Cathbad replied. Just tired. It has been a long day, and I am not as young as I once was. He turned to Aelbe with a smile. But I am also deeply happy. I have done what I set out to do. I have trained a worthy successor. The knowledge will continue. The chain is unbroken. He reached out and embraced Aelbe, something he had never done before. I am proud of you, he said simply. More than you can know. As they stood there in the cold night air, Aelbe felt something shift, a passing, a transition. He was no longer the student, but the teacher now. No longer the apprentice, but the master. It was both frightening and exhilarating, this new responsibility. But he also felt ready. The years of training, the visions, the teachings, they had all prepared him for this moment. He was a druid now, a keeper of the ancient wisdom, a bridge between worlds, and whatever changes the future might bring, he would face them with courage and with the knowledge that he did not walk alone. The ancestors walked beside him. The gods watched over him. And the land itself, eternal and patient, held him in its embrace. This was his calling, his purpose, his path. And he would walk it with honor, serving the balance, preserving the wisdom until it was his turn to pass the torch to the next generation. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and the winter night settled deep and peaceful over the land. Aelba had taken over many of Cathbad's duties now, not because the old druid could no longer perform them, but to give Aelba practice in his new role. He counseled disputes, prepared medicines, led some of the smaller rituals, and slowly the people began to come to him first, trusting in his wisdom, accepting him as their druid. But Cathbad was still there, a quiet presence offering guidance when Aelba asked for it, stepping in only when truly needed. They had settled into a new rhythm, teacher and student becoming more like equals, colleagues in the sacred work. On a particularly beautiful morning in late March, with birdsong filling the air and the scent of awakening earth all around, Cathbad called Olby to the teaching circle one last time. "Come," the old druid said, "walk with me. There is one final thing I must show you." They walked through the grove, and Aelba noticed that Cathbad moved more slowly than usual. Each step was deliberate, careful, as if the old man was conscious of every movement. They passed the lightning-struck oak, the sacred spring, the stone circle, all the familiar landmarks that had become so precious to Aelba over the years. Finally, they reached a part of the grove Aelba had rarely visited. It was a quiet hollow, surrounded by ancient yew trees. Yews which lived for thousands of years, yews which were associated with death and rebirth, with the boundary between worlds. In the center of the hollow was a smooth stone, flat and wide. Upon it were carved symbols so old they had worn almost smooth. Spirals and knots, patterns that spoke of eternity and transformation. "Ah, this," Cathbad said softly, "is where I will lie when my time comes. It is traditional for druids to be buried in the groves they tended, to return their body to the earth they served. The yews will watch over me, and in time my flesh will feed their roots, and I will become part of them." Aelba's throat tightened. "Master, please. You speak as if it is imminent." "Oh, it is closer than it was," Cathbad replied calmly. "I feel the pull now, Aelba. The call to move on. My work here is done. I have taught you all I know. I have served my people well. It is time for me to take the next journey." He settled himself on the stone, patting the space beside him. Aelba sat, fighting back tears. "Do not grieve," Cathbad said gently. "Death is not an ending, as you well know. It is a transformation. My body will return to the earth, yes, but my spirit will continue. I will cross to the Otherworld, and perhaps I will even see you there someday when you walk between the worlds." "I will miss you," Aelba managed to say. "And I will miss this world," Cathbad acknowledged. "The beauty of spring mornings, the taste of honey, the feeling of sun on skin, but I have had my time. 70 years is a gift, Aelba. I have seen so much, learned so much, loved so much. I am grateful for every moment." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the birds, feeling the gentle breeze. Finally, Cathbad spoke again. "I want you to promise me something," he said. anything," Elba replied. "Promise me that you will not let fear stop you. The changes are coming, as the Caliph foretold. There will be times when you are tempted to hide, to retreat, to protect yourself and the knowledge by keeping it secret. But that is not the way. Knowledge shared grows stronger. Wisdom given away returns tenfold. So teach, Elby. Teach everyone who will listen. Adapt the forms if you must, but never stop teaching the essential truths." "I promise," Elba said. "And promise me you will remember joy," Cathbad continued. "Our work is serious, yes, but the gods delight in laughter as much as in solemn prayer. Dance at the festivals, share meals with friends, take pleasure in the changing seasons. Life is meant to be lived fully, not spent in constant meditation and ritual." "I promise that too," Elba said, a small smile breaking through despite his sadness. Cathbad reached into his robes and pulled out a small object. It was his staff, or rather a piece of it. The crystal that had crowned the ashwood for so many years. He pressed it into Elba's hands. "Take this," he said. "Let it crown your own staff. I cut this crystal from a cave when I was young, and it has served me well. Now it will serve you. May it help you see clearly. May it focus your power. May it remind you of our time together." Elby clutched the crystal, feeling its cool weight in his palm. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything. For taking me as your student, for your patience, for showing me the path. I will honor your memory in all I do." "I know you will," Cathbad said warmly. "You are ready, I'll be. More than ready. You will be a great druid, perhaps greater than I ever was. You have the knowledge, the skill, and most importantly, the heart. Trust in yourself." They sat together for a long time as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Cathbad spoke of small things, memories from his long life. The first time he saw the ocean, a particularly difficult student who had challenged him at every turn, but became a fine druid in the end. A winter so harsh that the rivers froze solid. A summer so hot that the grass turned brown and crisp. "These are my treasures," he said. "Not gold or silver, but memories. Moments of connection, of beauty, of meaning. This is what makes a life rich." As afternoon approached, they rose and walked back through the grove. Cathbad moved with an air of finality, touching trees as he passed, murmuring words too soft for Aelbert to hear, saying goodbye, perhaps, or simply expressing gratitude. That evening, they shared a meal by the fire, as they had done countless times before. Simple food, bread and cheese and dried fruit, but made sacred by the companionship. They did not speak much. There was no need. Everything important had already been said. When Elba woke the next morning, he knew immediately that something had changed. The grove felt different, quieter. He rose quickly and went to where Cathbad had been sleeping. The old druid lay peaceful and still, his eyes closed, a slight smile on his weathered face. He had passed during the night, slipping away as gently as a leaf falling from a tree in autumn. His spirit had moved on to whatever came next. Aelbe knelt beside his master's body and wept, not from despair, for Cathbad would not have wanted that, but from love, from gratitude, from the simple human need to grieve what is lost, even when you know it is not truly gone. Later, Brigid came, and together with other druids from the region, they prepared Cathbad for his final rest. They washed his body with water from the sacred spring and dressed him in his finest robes. They placed his staff in his hands and surrounded him with offerings, acorns for the oaks he had loved, crystals for clarity, dried herbs for healing, all the tools of his trade. They carried him to the hollow with the yew trees and the ancient stone. There, they laid him down gently, arranging him as if he were simply sleeping. The community gathered, and one by one, people came forward to say their farewells. A farmer spoke of how Cathbad had saved his child from fever. A woman told of the wise counsel that had prevented her family from falling into poverty. A warrior described how the druid had helped him find peace after the horrors of battle. Story after story, all testifying to a life well lived, a legacy of service and compassion. When everyone else had spoken, Aelbe stepped forward. His voice was steady now, strengthened by purpose. Cathbad was my teacher, he began. But he was also my friend, my guide, my example of what it means to serve with wisdom and love. He taught me to see the connections between all things, to listen to the voice of the land, to walk between the worlds with courage. He showed me that knowledge is meant to be shared, that power is meant to be used in service of others, that the greatest magic is simply paying attention. He paused, looking down at his master's peaceful face. He told me not to grieve, but to celebrate a life fully lived. So let us do that. Let us remember his laughter as well as his wisdom. Let us honor him by continuing the work he began. Let us keep the sacred knowledge alive and pass it on to those who come after us. They sang the old songs then, the ones that helped spirits on their journey. And as they sang, Aelbe could have sworn he felt a presence, warm and approving. Cathbad was there, he thought, not in body but in spirit, watching over them one last time before moving on. As the sun set, they covered Cathbad's body with earth and stones, building a cairn that would mark his resting place for generations. The yew trees stood guardian around him, their ancient branches reaching toward the darkening sky. In the days that followed, Aelbe threw himself into the work. There was so much to do, and now he bore the responsibility alone. But he found that he was ready. Cathbad's teaching had prepared him well, and more than that, he felt his master's presence still, a quiet voice of guidance in moments of uncertainty. Spring deepened into early summer. The world turned green and lush. Flowers bloomed in wild profusion, and in the grove new growth appeared. Tender shoots pushing up around the cairn, fed by the body of the druid who had served the land so faithfully. One evening, as Aelbe sat by the fire, after a long day of tending the sick and counseling the troubled, he heard footsteps approaching. A young girl emerged from the trees, perhaps 12 years old, with eyes that held that same quality Ailbe's had held years ago. The quality of seeing beyond the surface of things. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "Are you the druid? My mother said I should come see you. She thinks I have the gift. I have dreams, you see. Strange dreams where I talk to animals and trees. And sometimes I know things I should not know, like when it will rain or when someone is coming to visit." Ailbe smiled, remembering a younger version of himself, nervous and uncertain, arriving at this same grove to begin his own training. "Come," he said warmly. "Sit by the fire. Tell me about these dreams, and then if you are willing, we will see if you have the calling to walk this path." As the girl settled beside him and began to speak, Ailbe felt the chain continuing, the knowledge passing from one generation to the next, just as Cathbad had passed it to him, just as countless teachers had done before them. The forms might change, the world might transform, but the essential wisdom would endure. And somewhere, in the spaces between worlds, Ailbe imagined Cathbad smiling. The fire crackled softly. The stars wheeled overhead, and in the sacred grove, beneath the watchful eyes of the ancient trees, a new journey was beginning. And that, my dear friends, is where our story comes to rest tonight. We have walked with Ailbe from apprentice to master, from uncertainty to wisdom, from youth to the fullness of his calling. We have witnessed the turning of the seasons, the thinning of the veil, the passage of knowledge from one generation to the next. The Druids may be gone now from our world, or at least they have transformed into something different. But the truths they taught remain, that all life is connected, that the earth is sacred, that balance must be maintained, that stories carry wisdom, that change is the only constant. These truths persist woven into the land itself, waiting for those who have ears to hear and eyes to see. May you rest well, dear listeners. May you dream of ancient groves and sacred wisdom. May you wake tomorrow with a renewed sense of connection to the world around you. And may you remember always that you, too, are part of the great pattern, the eternal dance of life and death and rebirth. Until we meet again, be safe and sweet dreams.